The highway to the danger zone has been repaved and given a fresh coat of paint, but playing with the boys will still take your breath away. Those were the songs. I'm so clever. The world learned about Fightertown, USA, where the best of the best naval aviators were made even better. And now, 36 years later, we've returned to see what Maverick has been up to since then. Spoiler, he's been a Maverick. Gotta live up to the name. Everything old is new again in this jet-powered sequel. Let's dig into nods, both obvious and subtle, and how filming blended the old and the new. There are a few themes where just a few notes put you right back into the movie. Most of them are written by John Williams, but Harold Faltermeyer's Top Gun anthem ranks up there with the best of them. The anthem stands shoulder to shoulder with Highway to the Danger Zone by Kenny Loggins, who in the 80s might have had more soundtrack appearances than albums. Highway to the Danger Zone only appeared in the beginning of Top Gun Maverick instead of frequently in the original. Loggins changed enough of the song to earn co-writing credit with the original writers Giorgio Moroder and Tom Whitlock.
I was in the studio recording Playing with the Boys when I got a call from Giorgio Moroder.
But if he'd taken it, it would have taken away Moroder and Whitlock's Oscar eligibility, so he let it pass, paving the way for the pair to win for the love theme Take My Breath Away to win an Oscar. Just like the first one, it opens with text that explains what Top Gun is, followed by an atmospheric montage of an aircraft carrier deck crew launching fighters in the air. The two sequences are almost completely identical except for the updated aircraft, predominantly the true star of the show, the FA-18 Super Hornet, instead of the F-14 Tomcat that the first movie turned into an icon. The original movie opens with Maverick having a little fun at the expense of a pair of Soviet fighters getting too close for comfort to the aircraft carrier, a stunt that doesn't sit well with his commander. While the commander desperately wants to bust Maverick, instead he has to send him to Top Gun. For Maverick, he's been assigned as a test pilot for Lockheed Skunk Works, who is testing an experimental craft meant to reach Mach 10 1/3 of the way to escape velocity.
Just want to serve my country, be the best fighter pilot in Navy, sir!
For the Maverick part, he rushes to test ahead of a member of the brass coming to close down the project. Maverick finds out that the craft can do Mach 10, but Mach 10.3, not so much. Once again, Maverick is rescued from consequences by being sent to Top Gun, this time as an instructor.
I thought of being an instructor, sir.
Of all the airborne shenanigans that define Maverick, buzzing the tower is clearly his favorite, primarily because it's the least favorite of anyone near the tower. This pastime resurfaces initially by flying over the commanding officer, arriving too late to stop a rogue flight test, and again when Maverick borrows a vintage fighter to bring him and Rooster back to the aircraft carrier at the end. 1986's Top Gun starts with a cocky Maverick singing an off-key rendition of You've Lost That Loving Feeling to Kelly McGillis's Charlie Blackwood, only for him to find out that she's the civilian instructor at Top Gun as a technical expert on fighter planes. Don't worry, it worked out for him. Well, for a little bit, as Charlie doesn't return in this film, but accidentally hazing her teacher does. This time it's in the form of new class hotshot hangman big-timing Maverick in the bar, only to find out he's the instructor. Top Gun introduced a lot of fighter jargon to the non-fighter pilot world. One thing we all became very clear about is that you don't go below the hard deck, the elevation limit for the fighter exercises. Maverick dips below to get Jester, voiding his victory and getting him in trouble with the instructors. Maverick returns to the importance of the hard deck when Maverick and Goose's son Rooster end up in a game of spiral chicken with the ground. You can't have intense training without a little mishap that reminds everyone it's not a game. For the original, that was the famous flat spin that happens when Maverick ends up in Iceman's wash that results in the death of Goose.
I feel the need for speed.
For Maverick, it almost seems as if payback will be the one as he blacks out during the high G maneuver, but instead, it's Phoenix who loses her ride to the same thing that brought down Scully, a bird strike. It's alright though, she's Phoenix. She emerges from the ashes to participate in the final raid. While Top Gun is about dogfighting training, we never really learn any dogfighting tactics, mostly because they're kind of complicated to explain as they take place in 3D space and use terms like Immelmann and Split S. Instead, what we learn is that Maverick is a Star Wars fan. Maverick's trick move is to use Luke's speeder trick of dumping on the brakes, making the pursuers pass right by. Maverick demonstrates the trick to the newbies during training while also putting a new spin on it during the mission when he skips over his wingman who is out of flares so that Maverick can use his. The new crop of students have their own rivalry between Hangman and, well, pretty much everyone else, but especially Goose's son, Rooster. Like Maverick after the crash, Rooster has a problem with hesitation but gets over it just like Iceman and Maverick, Hangman and Rooster shake hands as friends in the end. Top Gun made Fightertown, USA, aka Miramar in San Diego, famous as the home of the fighter training program Top Gun, and Maverick makes the short trip from the Mojave Desert to San Diego to once again attend Top Gun. The only problem is, the fighter instructor training program known as Top Gun isn't in San Diego anymore. The United States Navy Strike Fighter Tactics Instructor Program, which is now the official name of Top Gun, was moved to Naval Air Station Fallon in Nevada in 1996, and the former Top Gun base converted to a Marine base, which would explain why this training exercise isn't displacing a current crop of Top Gun students. As has become custom for a Tom Cruise action film, there was a lot of emphasis on the filming to be as real as possible. The jet stars of the show were about as expensive as the actor star of the movie. For 1 hour of time with the F-18's production gave the Navy $11,374 per hour. The toll to get on the highway to the danger zone is really pricey. In the original Top Gun, alongside the real F-18 fighters, were fighters playing dress-up as MiG fighter opponents. Well, technology hasn't changed and dress-up has gotten a lot better, including digitally replacing an F-18 as the experimental jet that Maverick flies in the beginning of the movie. It's a fighter that doesn't actually exist, but does resemble experimental craft, including the SR-72, a proposed successor to the SR-71 Blackbird, famous for being the fastest plane we know of, and the primary ride of the X-Men. The Dark Star and proposed SR-72 achieved their super speed through a dual-engine setup. Then scramjets take it up to crazy fast by having the air entering the engine remain past the speed of sound. There's a lot of effort put into making sure the F-18s don't have to face the fifth-generation fighters of the People's Republic of Rogue Statutopia, which in this case is a reasonable facsimile of the Russian-made Su-57.
Americans can't know it was Russian. It will come back to me.
Fifth generation refers to the current multi-purpose stealth fighters like the F-35. Naturally, Russia isn't handing out the latest stealth fighter for a 2-hour-long American patriotic cheerfest, though those had to be faked. The world was introduced to a then young Christian Bale jumping up and down yelling "Cadillac of the skies" as World War II P-51s attack a Japanese base in Spielberg's Empire of the Sun.
P-51 Cadillac of the sky!
The iconic fighter was the star of the fight for air superiority in World War II, and also Maverick's hobbycraft in the new movie. P-51s are rare and hard to come by, except not for Tom Cruise. That's because he already had one, so they used it for the movie.
Was he the first late-night show that I asked? Hell no. He was just the first one, and the only one who said yes.
While Charlie didn't come back for the new movie, it's pretty clear that Maverick has a type. Not just confident women, but women who like silver Porsches. Charlie chased down Maverick's Kawasaki Ninja in her Porsche 356 bathtub speedster in the first movie. For the second, director and Porsche fan Joseph Kosinski gave Penny a silver 1973 Porsche 911 RS. Bar business is good. The 911 RS is one of the most sought-after vintage 911s below its homologation stablemate, the Carrera RS. With less than 1,500 of them in existence, they'll take around 200 grand at auction. That car also came from Cruise's collection. Whatever Penny is doing with her money to acquire a rare, expensive Porsche and then use it as a daily driver, she's got nothing on whatever Maverick has been doing with his money. Located in the background of his dream hangar man cave is a green Aston Martin DB1. Built specifically for endurance racing, audiences might recognize it as the car Carroll Shelby won the 24 Hours of Le Mans with before being told his racing days were over in the Matt Damon Christian Bale movie Ford vs. Ferrari. Naturally, this is an extremely rare and historic car, fetching almost $20 million at auction. No wonder Maverick doesn't want a promotion. He's clearly been doing some lucrative investing. One of the more iconic images from the original movie is Maverick drag racing jets taking off, riding his 1996 Kawasaki Ninja. The first year the bike carried the Ninja name. The original Ninja makes a return in the movie as well as an example from every version of the Ninja since. Seems like Maverick has a bit of a brand loyalty when it comes to motorcycles. While Charlie didn't make the cut for the return of Maverick and his Top Gun shenanigans, Maverick's love interest Penny isn't a new character. While she never appeared in the first movie, she's mentioned twice as one of Maverick's romantic dalliances. Think of her as Rosaline, the girl Romeo was obsessed with before Juliet. Didn't think we'd give you a Shakespeare reference in a video about Top Gun, did ya? When being chewed out for taunting the MiGs in the first movie, the commander mentions a history of tower flybys and one with an admiral's daughter. Goose's wife, Carol, tells Maverick that Goose told her all about the time she went ballistic with Jenny Bradshaw. It turns out they've been doing the on-again, off-again before Charlie even entered the picture. In a cheeky nod to the actor portraying Penny, she's introduced in the movie while a David Bowie song plays on the jukebox, who of course was the Goblin King in Connolly's breakout movie Labyrinth, otherwise known as the reason I wanted to date a Ren Fair gal as a youngin'. Call signs are a big part of Top Gun and the reason that grown men refer to themselves by names like Maverick, Goose, Iceman, and Jester. New movie, new set of students, new set of call signs. For this movie, the actors were allowed to pick out their own call signs, with Miles Teller choosing the foul name, Rooster, to go with his father's foul sign, Goose. Get it? Foul, as in the type of bird. You get it. For Tom Cruise, just filming real jets wasn't enough. For some real, he wanted the actors actually in the aircraft. I mean, who's gonna pass up a ride on an F-18? Unfortunately, the cockpits weren't designed to accommodate IMAX cameras, so a new camera was customized using a fiber optic line to attach the lens to the sensor in a separate box elsewhere in the cockpit. To prepare the actors, Cruise himself designed a 3-month-long training program to get the actors ready to pretend to be flying their F-18s from the back seat, in a manner more convincing than me sawing away at an imaginary steering wheel making vroom vroom noises. It's not just not throwing up or passing out that they had to worry about. Up in the air, they were on their own, which included having to do their own makeup touch-ups and adjustments as well as turning the camera on and off themselves. They were so meticulous that more footage was shot for Maverick than was shot for the entire Lord of the Rings trilogy. What's a Top Gun movie without a slow-motion sequence or ripped oiled bodies playing in the sand? This time it was fighter football, which is defense and offense at the same time. If you're trying to figure out how that works, well, just look at this footage of shirtless, athletic people for a moment and stop worrying about it. Ever the perfectionist, Cruise wasn't happy with the footage the first time it was shot and called for a reshoot. Except everyone had celebrated finishing the scene by eating carbs and drinking beer and had to go back to the gym to get back into impossible shape. Top Gun is filled with adrenaline-pumping aerial stunts performed by trained naval pilots capable of such things, but there are some precision moves that, while part of every pilot's combat training, are probably best known as part of the demonstrations put on by the Navy's precision flying team, the Blue Angels. There were Blue Angel pilots flying some of the craft in the movie, including the flyby that eventually became the Dark Star, and the dramatic shot of Maverick flying only a few feet off the ground, proving that the raid on rogue state land was possible. Originally set to release in 2020, thanks to the, well, everything, the movie was delayed. While other movies opted for short streaming windows or just going straight to streaming, crews insisted that the movie shot entirely in IMAX 6K wait until theaters reopen to be seen as intended. I mean, it would be a shame to waste all that on a computer screen with 2-inch speakers.
Prey is the new film from Dan Trachtenberg that serves as a prequel to the iconic Arnold film. Set on the American plains of 1719, a young Comanche woman matches wits with an alien hunter. Also, some Frenchmen end up Julienne. I'm Chris Goodmakers, and I'm here to break down the new movie. Spoilers ahead! The mandibled alien is on a mission that makes it stand out from its fearsome film predecessors. The predators of old crossed paths with humanity while on a mission to hunt the most dangerous game. Except for the one in The Predator that somehow thinks autism is the next step in human evolution. Yes, the genetic superpower to know too much about Star Trek and hate wood-handled cutlery. When the first Predator fought Arnold, it was on a ghoulish safari. Drawn to the intense heat and violent conflict of the South American jungle, the alien picks off a team of elite soldiers one by one. When it returned in the near future of 1997, it was to the gang war-stricken Los Angeles. There it fought the local criminals and cops until it was ultimately defeated by Danny Glover. This Predator was also very much on safari and collecting trophies. The next group of predators decided to hunt smarter, not harder. Predators, the 2010 film, had the aliens rounding up some particularly dangerous humans. The group was dropped off on an alien world where they were hunted for sport. Then there was the autism thing. The Predator in Prey is on a different mission, one that sets up the predators to come. It is reconning Earth for the best prey. They must be part of a vanguard or recon unit that searches worlds for the best things to hunt. Thanks to Naru, the predators now know humans are one of the fiercest. It's time for everyone's favorite subject, the inconsistent continuity of a sci-fi film franchise. Since Prey is set in the early 1700s, it offers the earliest glimpse into the history of the Predators. Except not really. Sandwiched in between the Alien and Predator franchise are the two experiments in cross-franchise viability, Alien vs. Predator and Aliens vs. Predator Requiem. Both these movies had questionable continuity when they came out, but since then they have been disowned by one franchise and canonized by another. The first AVP film features Charles Wayland, founder of the first part of the Wayland-Yutani Corporation. This is the first time we have seen the founder of the evil futuristic megacorporation on film, but not the last. Prometheus gave us a lot of things, including endlessly unanswered questions. However, it also gave us another founder in Peter Wayland. Since Prometheus is more tied into the world of Alien than AVP, that makes the crossover film non-canon. For Aliens, at least, not Predators, because in the Shane Black flop, The Predator, there is a quick shot of the makeshift spear given to the lead of AVP. So that film is canon to the Predator series. But wait! AVP established that aliens were on Earth thousands of years ago. So why is the Predator just reconning the native species of Earth now?
I don't know, I've gone cross-eyed.
How do we resolve this continuity issue? Easy. Just make The Predator non-canon. And nothing of value would be lost. Prey is actually very light on details when it comes to the franchise's continuity. Because of its setting and subject matter, it's a very standalone feature. There is, however, one huge piece of continuity that answers a decades-old mystery. When the alien hunter came to the big city in Predator 2, it ended up going head-to-head with Danny Glover. After the chase that takes them from the rooftops of LA to its underground, the pair find themselves on the Predator's ship. After a climactic knife fight, Glover dispatches his opponent. The defeated Predator's clan rewards the LAPD officer with a token of his victory. It's a flintlock pistol engraved with a name and date. Prey gives us the origin of the pistol. Naru uses it to defeat the alien Pathfinder after getting it from an unlucky fur trader. How did the Predators end up with it centuries later? Well, those questions may lead us into the setup for Prey 2. If we ever get it. I mean, ask us PC gamers how long we've been waiting for a different Prey 2. At the end of the film, Naru has defeated the alien hunter and taken his decapitated head back to her tribe. She has passed a ritual rite of passage that requires you to hunt something hunting you back. I guess this qualifies, and then some. However, the closing credits give us a glimpse of what happens next. The end credits show multiple Predator ships arriving at the village. It's safe to say they came looking for their missing member. Predator 2 shows us exactly what happens when they see a human has defeated one of them. Perhaps the aliens took the gun from Naru, a token of their newfound prey. The other possibility is that Naru took it with her when she joined the hunters, like a comic counterpart once did. How about some quick callbacks to the first Predator movie? And its endlessly quotable lines. The biggest is when Naru and her brother are being used as bait. Naru says that she's not even sure if this beast can be killed, to which Tabe replies,
"If it bleeds, we can kill it."
It's the same line delivered by Arnold before they begin setting traps for the cloaked monster.
"If it bleeds, we can kill it."
This isn't the only callback, however. When Naru is taken captive by the hunting party, she's tied up and hauled around by a big group of scared men. She's sharing this imagery with Anna, a guerrilla fighter who ends up being hauled along with the Doom Commando unit. Both break their bonds soon enough, but Naru's group doesn't survive as long as Arnold's crew. Except Shane Black, but after The Predator, he deserved it. Throughout the film, Naru uses a fictional flower called orange tatsi as a natural medicine. Its effects as a potential weapon against the Predator are set up throughout the film. When she first gives the flower to an injured tribe member, he immediately starts shivering. She explains that the cold slows his blood, preventing fatal bleeding. When she gives it to Raphael, she sees that the Predator is unable to see him. She uses it as a version of the mud Arnold uses to camouflage himself against the Predator. There's even an allusion to the mud with the quagmire she finds herself stuck in. The flower is only one of a long list of camouflage. Predator 2 had thermal insulating suits that came with big hot lights. Pro move, guys. Adrian Brody also used heaps of mud, but added blinding fire to the mix. Finally, in Shane Black's The Predator, I don't know what happened because I lost all ability to absorb anything happening in the movie after that motel scene. I didn't like it. It's time to talk about the Predator's arsenal. After all, what is a hunter without his laser-guided plasma caster and light reflective cloaking armor? Hey, do you think the Predator might be kind of a cheater? The alien's weapons have expanded over the years. His introduction gave him a laser gun, arm blade, and wrist bomb. The sequel added his spear, net, and autoglaive. From then on, it was mostly just making things bigger and longer. Prey breaks that trend and gives us some unique new gadgets. This Predator is using laser-guided bolts that it is to retrieve manually. He still has the net, and we finally get to see it dice someone into cubes. Instead of the autoglaive, this Predator has a shield that is equally as sharp and retractable. There is also the wrist-mounted auto blades that shred everything on sight, echoing Gary Busey's end. There's also the spear, which is now a secret sword. I know what I want next on Man-at-Arms. This new member of the Ucha race, and yes, that's what they're really called, looks very different. While most Predators have a high-tech silver mask, this one has a bone one that leaves its mouth free to bite. This is not without a precedent. The aliens have always used bones as armor and decoration, with the leader in 2010's Predators wearing someone else's jaw. Probably envy for not having one of his own. It's also the leanest Predator since Kevin Peter Hall, moving with swiftness and speed. The face is also different from what we've seen before. For Dan Trachtenberg, it was about making the alien more primal and more stripped down, which I guess is why he's also the most nude we have ever seen a Predator. Not even any fishnet. Though that loincloth does leave a lot to the imagination. While we're on the subject of the film's director, when Dan Trachtenberg began his career, he did so in a way many filmmakers start out, with a fan film. His short film, Portal, No Escape, earned him buzz online. After a while, he got a chance at a feature film and began work on a project simply titled The Cellar. When it was eventually released, it did so under a different name. 10 Cloverfield Lane was a pseudo-sequel to the hit found footage film, and gained critical praise. Well, it turns out that even the Predator isn't as evil as 1700s fur trappers. When Naru runs into a group of men, she isn't privy to their foreign language. As such, the film leaves large parts of their dialogue untranslated. At least it was for me on every version I watched. Even the subtitles were in French. Well, with some Google foo, I translated it for you. I won't give you a play-by-play, but some choice moments include this guy wanting to eat Naru's dog. Also, there is the fact that Raphael is only along for his translating skills, and that his nickname is Dirty Raphael. Yeah, he earned that one. There are a few quick moments that are part of some of the film's tremendous use of setup and payoff. The first is with the cougar, which Naru is hunting as part of her hunting trial. When it confronts her on the tree, she's quickly back to the edge. When she falls, you can quickly see that the spear actually makes contact with the cat's side. Tabe confirms this later when he says that she had weakened the cougar, so he could finish it off. No one likes a credit stealer, man! Naru's encounter with the cougar also provides her with a valuable lesson. She looks back at the flashing lights in the woods. It's a mistake she never makes again. When the fur trappers are being sliced to pieces, she moves forward without looking back. The same goes for when the alien lurks behind her, falling into her trap. That moment even echoes the first Predator when Arnold was similarly camouflaged. Naru sets up a similar ambush to her muscle-bound counterpart. In the end, both had to shed their last ounce of fear to conquer the beast. At least Naru got to keep something for her trouble. There's another intentional callback to the first Predator with the wound Tabe receives. In the first Predator, Native American soldier Billy decides to make his stand against the invisible monster. He disarms himself except for a large knife. He then makes a single cut across his chest to draw the Predator's attention. The same exact cut is made on Tabe when he and Naru are left as bait for the monster. It goes well for both, I guess, but Tabe seems to last longer than Billy did. When Naru uses the hobbled fur trader as bait for the Predator, she actually performs an action that's very taboo to the Comanche. While using the Frenchman to call the attention of the hunter, she masks her heat signature with the orange flower. She then lets out an ominous whistle. In Comanche culture, whistling at night is said to call down evil spirits. As such, most Comanche tend to avoid this action. Not Naru, she is intentionally calling the Predator, who she earlier described as a monster from a children's story. I guess it was only bad luck for the fur trapper, but he deserved it anyway. I should know, I translated what he was saying this whole movie. It wasn't polite. It turns out the Predator is extremely goatable. When Naru is ready to deal the killing blow, she is leaning up against a dead tree and begging the monster to end her. She taunts it into following into her trap. It's a shared moment with the first film when Dutch does the same thing. Naru turns its helmet and laser sight against it while Dutch drops a big log on it. Setting traps for the Predator has long been the best way to dispatch the monster. I guess you start to forget about actual hunting when you rely on heat vision and plasma casters. Again, the Predator is a cheater. Called out. The Predator is first and foremost a trophy hunter, and Prey continues that tradition. The first do it collects her from the snake and the wolf. The wolf's skull even comes back to bite it. It's the same skull that Tabe uses to stab the beast in the leg, helping Naru escape with his last breath. One of the key features of the Ucha's chosen hunting ground is some sweltering weather. They are said to be attracted to two things: heat and conflict. The first film has a war-torn South American jungle. The second had gang-torn LA during a heat wave. 2 even has a line saying that the hunter has been spotted in Beirut, among other war-torn places. So why the Great Plains? Well, Prey is set at the height of summer. It's clearly a warmer month for the Comanche. The conflict, however, is also there. Firstly, the local animals are super predators that are shown to be a challenge for the local humans. However, it's the fur traders that bring the true conflict. They are causing death en masse with both the animal population and possibly other local tribes. There's been a big moment in every Predator film since the first. It's when the titular hunter is unmasked and we get a good look at its big bug-like face, most often accompanied by a line that explains he is aesthetically unpleasing and incestuous. Praise moment comes when the creature's mask is knocked off. This new Predator's mask also raises a question about continuity. I always thought that while they could breathe air, Earth was missing something else. In Predator 2, that movie's alien even huffs his mask a few times during the final confrontation. Maybe it was just alien whippets to get him real jazzed to fight Danny Glover.
Turning Red is packed full of Pixar Easter eggs, subtle references, and an absolute boatload of Canadiana. So without further ado, we're going to dive right in and look at 25 things you might have missed in Pixar's latest flick. And get ready to feel super Canadian, eh? Pixar has become famous for teasing their next project in their most current movie, and Turning Red was teased in Luca with a reference to the boy band Four Town that plays a prominent part in Turning Red. For any big Pixar fans out there, you'll know that next on the animation studio's calendar is the Toy Story spin-off Lightyear, with the Chris Evans-led movie set to take off in the summer. As you could probably guess, Turning Red makes a reference to the upcoming film, with a Star Command sticker being seen on the underside of a skateboard. Keeping on with the Toy Story references, as May loses control of her emotions and goes full panda, she runs away from her school and flees home to Chinatown, running across the rooftops as her mother pursues her. As she jumps from building to building, as well as the famous Toronto skyline, we see a familiar cloud formation. That cloud formation is extremely reminiscent of the wallpaper seen in Andy's room from Toy Story, and although there was no CN Tower in his wallpaper, we can be pretty sure that the similarities were no happy accident. And still on the subject of Toy Story, locating the famous Pizza Planet truck in Pixar movies has become as commonplace as finding the Luxo Ball and A113, and the trio are seen as the original Pixar Easter eggs, but more on the other two later. So, you can bet your bottom dollar, or loonie I should say, that the truck makes an appearance in Turning Red. The famous vehicle can be seen on a Toronto street at the 1 hour, 11 minutes, and 22 seconds mark as May makes her way towards the Sky Dome. Now, while Domee Shi has worked on Inside Out, Incredibles 2, and The Good Dinosaur, Turning Red was her first time as a solo director on a feature film. Although, she did of course helm the adorable short movie Bao, which was also set in Toronto and follows a Chinese-Canadian woman who is suffering from empty nest syndrome until she gets a second shot at motherhood when one of her handmade Bao dumplings comes to life. Domee Shi makes reference to her short film in Turning Red with a restaurant sign reading Bao in the trademark text and design, with the sign being visible in the background at around the 6-minute 13-second mark. Now, we mentioned Luca having a Turning Red Easter egg in the movie, but did Turning Red do the same thing for Luca? As May goes into a frenzy sketching some thirst drawings of her crush Devon, in one of the drawings she turns him into a merman. Now, while the main characters in Luca are more sea monsters than mermen, could this drawing be a reference to the movie? It's a little contentious, but I like to think that it is. The next one is also a subtle reference, but arguably less contentious. But in a blink and you'll miss it moment on the streets of Toronto, a hanger with a Day of the Dead skull can be seen in the top corner of the frame. The image is very reminiscent of the same hangers and skull symbol seen in the movie Coco, with Day of the Dead obviously being a main theme in the movie. Continuing on with our other Pixar references, there are a couple of costume designs that remind us of the classic Pixar movie Monsters, Inc. Abby's outfit with the pink flowers on her overalls are very reminiscent of Boo's door in the movie, while a t-shirt that one of the kids wears while waiting to see May in panda form looks very much like a monster from that movie. Perhaps one that visited him as a child? Another blink and you'll miss it reference comes again in sticker form. On one of the stalls in the girls' bathroom, we can see a sticker of a clownfish. This is obviously a reference to the titular fish Nemo from Finding Nemo, with our flippered friend popping up many times in multiple Pixar movies. But my favorite blink and you'll miss it Easter egg has to do with, in my opinion, one of the best Pixar movies of all time, and a certified tearjerker, Up. In one of the classrooms, a skeleton of a strange-looking large bird can be seen in the corner. That skeleton just so happens to look a lot like Kevin from the movie Up, who was, of course, a snipe, a giant mythical South American bird who Charles and Russell encounter in the movie. I still maintain to this day, though, that it should have been called Wesley. Another reference to a Pixar short movie comes in the form of two umbrellas seen in the Lee household, one red and one blue. Now, on the surface, this may seem like a Matrix red and blue pill reference, but it is actually a nod to the Pixar short The Blue Umbrella, which follows a gentle romance that blossoms during a rainy day in a busy, bustling city between a pair of differently colored umbrellas. Continuing on with the shorts theme, we see a lot of nods to Spark shorts in May's room. Now, this includes Pearl from the short of the same name, which follows an earnest ball of yarn named Pearl, who gets a job at a fast-paced startup, with the figure of Pearl being seen on May's desk.
Hi, I'm Pearl.
The other is a reference to the short Burrow, where a young rabbit embarks on a journey to dig the burrow of her dreams, despite not having a clue what she's doing, and a sticker of Burrow Bunny can be seen on May's notebook. Now, we said we'd get back to them, and that's because it wouldn't be a Pixar movie without a subtle nod to A113, the classroom used by graphic design and character animation students at the California Institute of the Arts, which has become an inside joke at Pixar. And of course, the Luxo Ball, a yellow ball with a blue stripe and a red star that first appeared in the Luxo Jr. short as a prop for Luxo Jr. Now, starting off with A113, the classroom is referenced during the end credits as we see a ticket stub for Four Town's concert with A113 written on it. Now, I'm not gonna lie, I almost missed the Luxo Ball and was starting to think Domichi was trolling us when she said it does appear in the movie. But eventually, I found it, which gave me a great sense of relief. If you look closely during Tyler's party in the movie, we can see the famous ball floating around in the pool, which well and truly cements this movie as a Pixar flick. Now, the central plot of the movie is that May must take part in a ritual during the Red Moon on May 25th if she wants to be free of her panda self forever. But, of course, this is the same day that Four Town are playing in Toronto, causing a conflict of interest for May. But anyway, the reason I bring this up is that if you Google when the red moon, or the penumbral lunar eclipse, to use the scientific name, happened in 2002, you would see that it actually took place on May 26th. So why change the date? Well, that might be because Turning Red is Pixar's 25th feature film, so by having this event happen on the 25th, it might be a reference to that. But then again, who knows? Now, like the Luxo Ball, A113, and the Pizza Planet truck, another Easter egg that often comes up in Pixar movies is the Chinese food takeout box, and Domichi was apparently excited to include it in her movie. The box has appeared in the likes of A Bug's Life, Toy Story 2 and 4, Ratatouille, Inside Out, Soul, and Incredibles 2, and is another main staple of Pixar movies. Just saying though, I've kind of always wanted to eat Chinese food out of a box like that, but I never have. Man, I feel like I'm missing out. Now, on to the Canadian and Toronto Easter eggs, because this movie is as Canadian as Ryan Gosling in a hockey jersey guzzling maple syrup. Or Ryan Reynolds in a hockey jersey guzzling maple syrup. Or Ryan George in a hockey jersey guzzling maple syrup. I don't know, whichever one is your favorite Canadian Ryan. Or alternatively, your favorite Canadian Justin, like me. Get it? I'm Justin, I'm Canadian. No? Alright, let's move on. In fact, a bunch of the cast, including Sandra Oh and Maitreyi Ramakrishnan, are Canadian. But anyway, let's get on to the Easter eggs. Now, first on the Canadian Easter eggs is the school May and her friends go to, which is named after the 14th Prime Minister of Canada, Lester B. Pearson. Now, while Pearson does have a number of schools named after him, as well as an airport, there isn't one located in downtown Toronto, and this is an invention of the movie, and one to pay homage to Canadiana. I mean, their mascot is a beaver. Man, it is refreshing to have Toronto represented as itself in a movie, and not New York or Chicago or even Gotham for once. And as a Toronto local, Domichi made sure to make a number of references specific to the city. Famous Toronto buildings like the CN Tower and the Sky Dome, which is now known as the Rogers Centre, are seen throughout, as well as areas such as Chinatown and Kensington Market. We also see references to Daisy Mart, which is a real chain in Toronto, Tim Hortons' classic cuisine Timbits, which if you haven't tried, you really need to, and Toronto's transit system, the TTC, and their vibrant red streetcars, which look almost exactly like they do in real life. Though I can guarantee that no TTC driver will wait like 5 minutes for you to get on. That bit was rather unrealistic. Ooh, and a fun ironic fact involving the TTC, the proprietary software developed and used in-house by Pixar is known as Presto. which is also the name of the system that Toronto commuters use to pay and get around on the TTC, like a London Oyster card or a New York Metro card. Now, there's one thing to know about residents of the Six is that they love their sports teams. I mean, we have all seen what Drake's like at a Raptors game. So it's unsurprising that the local teams are referenced throughout the movie. Speaking of the Raptors, the purple basketball jerseys are a reference to the Raptors' old jerseys, with the number 15 one that Tyler wears being a nod to Vince Carter, who was the king of Toronto before Kawhi and his laugh came to town. The stuffed bear with a blue maple leaf that can be seen throughout the movie is a reference to the Toronto Maple Leafs and their mascot, Carlton the Bear, while the Sky Dome, or Rogers Centre, is the home of the Toronto Blue Jays, which is referenced at the end of the movie as a Blue Jay is seen outside of the stadium as they rebuild it. Turning Red makes a direct reference to Canadian music icon Celine Dion, but there is a more subtle reference to a famous Canadian tune. As May rushes through her flute recital, you can hear that the notes that she's playing belong to the Canadian national anthem, O Canada, which, no matter where you're from, you have to admit, that anthem slaps hard. One of the things that Domichi admitted she enjoyed was stumping her American colleagues with the use of Canadian lingo. Canadian phrases are used throughout the movie, such as a toque, which is a winter hat, and a loonie and toonie, which is slang for $1 and $2, as the $1 coin has a loon bird on it, while the toonie, well, it rhymes with loony. As the movie is set in the early 2000s, when boy bands were at their peak, it is no surprise that Four Town are represented in the same vein as Backstreet Boys and NSYNC.
May I remind you what real men look like? Four Town. Yes!
However, their name is likely a reference to the boy band O-Town and Toronto's very own short-lived early 2000s boy band trio B44, which were best known for their song Get Down. See, Canada has given more than just Justin Bieber, The Weeknd, and Drake. They also gave us Nickelback and... look at this photograph! Every time I do, it makes me laugh. Now, let's get into some name meanings, shall we? Now, of course, May sounds like the month of May when the red moon and the whole movie is taking place, and can be seen as a month where spring changes into summer, which can be seen as a reinforcement of the changing and puberty theme that is prevalent throughout the movie. However, her full name, Mei Lin, translates as beautiful gem or beautiful rose, with rose reinforcing the red color motif. Although, admittedly, I did also see a translation for the name that read Plum Grove, but I'm no expert on the subject, so I don't know which one is more correct. Now, continuing on with the name meanings, though, the meaning behind May's mother, Ming's name, is bright, which could arguably again reinforce the color motif, while May's father's name, Jin, means tenderness, which feels very in keeping with his softer, more compassionate character. Now, if you were born post-2000, a lot of the nostalgia in the movie may have been lost on you. But if you're an old bastard like me, a number of the references to the early 2000s definitely hit home. Whether it be references to those lovable Tamagotchis or the beast that was the Nokia 3310, the movie is packed full of references to the easier and, dare I say, better days of the early 2000s. Now, one of the things that made Turning Red really different to some of the Pixar movies that came before it was that it broke away from the typical 3D animation style Pixar has implemented, and towards the 2D style used by anime that inspired Domichi. Now, she admitted that she was a big fan of Hayao Miyazaki's masterpiece, Spirited Away, which also has themes of puberty and going through changes. But she also said that she was directly inspired by the animes Sailor Moon, Ranma 1/2, Fruits Basket, and Inuyasha for Turning Red. Again, for the younger people in the audience, you may not have realized just how big a deal Twilight was, with it being literally everywhere. So, it's no surprise that Turning Red parodies the phenomenon that was Twilight. If you look at the cover of the book Nightfall that Priya was reading, you'll notice that it looks very similar to the cover of Twilight, as well as it being following along with the Twilight and vampire theme.
Hey kids, another blockbuster Marvel movie has made it to the theater screens. That means we gotta talk about all the things that you missed. Maybe, I don't know you, maybe you didn't, but maybe you did. Here's a video! Out of context spoilers! So, let's just start with the moment where I went, holy butts, this movie is amazing. No, it wasn't the complete decimation of the Illuminati, something that was, admittedly, weirdly therapeutic to watch. It was the sheer raininess of the whole film, specifically the moment where I realized exactly what Doctor Strange was going to do with his deceased alternate universe self. That's right, Deadite Doctor Strange, baby. The character people assumed would be the true villain of the film was, in fact, our lead in a decaying skin suit. Amazing. For those not in the horror movie know, director Sam Raimi also directed the Evil Dead trilogy, a series predicated on a demonic Book of the Dead, in that case the flesh-bound Necronomicon, which when used brings about demonic possession of those who dared tamper with it. Sound familiar? Yeah, if this was and actually come to think of it also, it's based around H.P. Lovecraft nonsense. H.P. Lovecraft created Cthulhu, who's the demon in the comics, who is in turn the creator of the Darkhold. Cthon, who also looks like Cthulhu. We'll get into that in a second. Anyway, yeah, if this was a comic book, it'd be called Doctor Strange versus the Evil Dead, which, by the way, where's my tie-in, Marvel? Come on, do your job! I don't actually have time to go to a comic book store. They might have done it. I have no idea. If you didn't stay for the mid-credits scene, well, shame. But also, you missed a pretty huge cameo. Furiosa herself, Charlize Theron, showed up as Clea, the Sorcerer Supreme of the Dark Dimension, and in the comics, eventually the wife of Doctor Strange. Looks like the two of them are gonna have to team up to figure out all this multiversal madness started by, Sylvie, the female version of Loki in the series Loki. Admittedly, Clea is not an alternate version of Strange himself, but still, there is a bit of a comparison to be made, so pretty interesting correlation right in there. Other big $2 words. This is going horribly. But what exactly is Clea coming to Strange for? Well, considering she immediately cut open a portal to the Dark Dimension after mentioning an incursion, I'm gonna go with that. The incursion, as we saw, is something that happens when two universes smash into each other with Earth as the central point of impact. This is inferred to be the cause of the catastrophic conditions of the last universe visited by Strange and Christine. Now, based on all the multiverse-based tomfoolery currently occurring in every other Marvel Phase 4 production, it seems like we're heading into a big Avengers-style event film based on some truly catastrophic universe tampering. So, expect a return to the incursion concept sooner rather than later. But hey, where's my money at for where this whole franchise is going? Gotta be Secret Wars. That's also where everybody else's money is at. It's not a new concept, but still, I mean, that's the reason we're all saying it's gonna be Secret Wars, because it seems like it's gonna be Secret Wars. In the comics, there are two major versions of this event. The 1984 version, aka the biggest toy commercial in comics history, featured the villainous Beyonder kidnapping a bunch of heroes and villains, placing them on a planet called Battle World, and having them fight it out. Eventually, this turns into an everyone against Dr. Doom story, as is often the case when you bring in Dr. Freakin' Doom. Secret Wars was super popular and, amongst other things, gave Spidey his initial black symbiote suit. Secret Wars 2 and 3 followed shortly after, mostly just expounding on the Beyonder and his origin. But the Secret Wars of 2015, yeah, that's the one that we want. You know, basically the whole idea is that the multiverse collapses, and Dr. Doom becomes a god in his own, like, kind of sort of pocket dimension, and then there's these multiversal life rafts with all these heroes and villains that come by, and then there's all these other heroes and villains that don't remember who they are, and blah, 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 blah. Battle world, people fight, the multiverse is recreated, and what happened afterward was kind of disappointing, but point is, it's a whole other battle world, and it's pretty rad. Some fans have had questions about where exactly Wanda's children came from, and that's a mystery that the film explains. Since Thanos is defeated pre-snap, their ages aren't an issue because she's of course had more time to have and raise children. Additionally, the whole reason she's able to create the same children that exist in the alternate universes is that she dreamed them. We learn in Multiverse of Madness that our dreams are glimpses into alternate realities, from which she pulled the look and personalities of her kids. Pretty simple. Where's Vision, or, you know, whoever the father is in those universes?
Where were you hiding all these kids up till now?
What?
By the by, I'm not sure how intentional this was, but the acronym for Multiverse of Madness spells out MOM. Considering this is a film partially about motherhood and the connection between a mom and her kids, pretty cool, coincidence or not. Doctor Strange, in the MOM. Ugh. In the first Doctor Strange, Mordo mentions the Living Tribunal. If you look closely during Doctor Strange and America Chavez's initial trip through the various universes, we do get a brief glimpse at that comic book character. Whether or not this is just an Easter egg, of course, remains to be seen, but in the comics, he's basically the judge of all realities and is in charge of keeping the multiverse nice and tidy. Comic book spoilers. In New Avengers number 30, shortly before the Time Runs Out arc and Secret Wars, the Living Tribunal was killed, and his body was left on the moon. Kind of like a more savage version of what Goku does to Monster Carrot in Dragon Ball. Another quick blink and you'll miss it universe that would have been really cool to visit is the Savage Land, which is basically just a prehistoric world. In the comics, this is a physical location located in Antarctica, but it would seem, based on this brief glimpse, that it's in a universe all its own, perhaps an entire Earth where dinosaurs never went extinct. So I guess that's one big negative for Doctor Strange in the Mom. No Doctor Strange fighting dinos. Shame, shame. If you're a fan of Sam Raimi's Evil Dead trilogy, you no doubt recognized this 1973 Oldsmobile Delta 88 Royale floating around in the messed up final reality Strange and Christine visit. This car appears in every Sam Raimi film and is notably Ash's car in the Evil Dead trilogy. It's also the car Uncle Ben drives in Spider-Man, and Bruce Campbell has stated that it even shows up in a disassembled version in his western The Quick and the Dead. The same fans who noticed that Easter egg definitely got what Raimi was going for with Bruce Campbell's phenomenal cameo as Pizza Papa. After he gets belligerent over America not paying for his balls, Strange steps in and magics Pizza Papa into hitting himself for 3 straight weeks. Any other rando Strange did that too. It might seem out of character, kind of a dick move on Doctor Strange's part, but I'd like to think that old Doc Strange just really loves the Evil Dead movies, seeing as this is one of Bruce Campbell's most famous bits, specifically from Evil Dead 2.
It helps maintain the illusion.
We even get a classic Raimi ending. Evil Dead famously ends with Ash being attacked and presumably possessed by a demonic force. Evil Dead 2 ends with him trapped in medieval times, and the alternate ending for Army of Darkness has him trapped in a desolate post-apocalypse. That's not even digging into the relatively predictable ending in Drag Me to Hell, which I won't spoil, but the title. So when Strange is walking along and gets the old forehead pain followed by a horrifying third eye reveal, it very much feels in tune with Raimi's style. But that's not all. Even the mid-credits scene, in which he's all hunky-dory moments later, jives with the Raimi touch, as in Evil Dead 2, where it turns out Ash makes it out of his predicament just fine. Well, minus a hand and scarred for life and trapped in a medieval world for a period of time, and he loses the love of his life forever. But mostly fine. The Raimi touches keep on coming though. For example, when America Chavez and Doctor Strange are just kind of falling through the universes, you can see a taxi cab sporting a Grindhouse Releasing logo. This one's a bit more of a deep cut. A little background. My passions lie mostly in film preservation and physical media, and Grindhouse Releasing is an amazing company that restores and releases cult films theatrically and in pretty rad Blu-ray editions. The company is owned by Multiverse of Madness editor Bob Murawski, who also edited Army of Darkness, Spider-Man 1 and 2, and Drag Me to Hell, amongst others. Grindhouse Releasing also handles theatrical distribution for the original Evil Dead. Point is, Raimi has a strong connection to the company, and it's just really cool to see them get the Easter egg treatment. Oh, and as long as I'm on my soapbox, this new Death Game Blu-ray, so good. Not for everybody, but I really enjoyed it. It's what that Keanu Reeves movie with Eli Roth, Knock Knock, is based on, and it's a really good little gem from the 70s, so check that out. Oh, and this might be a bit of a stretch, but when Wanda is chasing Strange and company through the tunnels under the Illuminati base, that does seem like a direct nod to Zombie Wanda in What If. While none of the What If characters appear in the film, between this and Captain Carter, there does appear to be some references that Marvel couldn't help but pop in. Or it's just me stereotyping crazy witches with a preference for the color red. I don't know. This shot in Evil Dead is also referenced by Wanda when she enters a mirror as if it's water, mostly because, it is water. One of the more rad yet simplistic practical effects in 2 Sam Raimi movies, and in this case, part of a truly horrifying sequence that might be one of the absolute top scenes in all of Marvel history for me. I love that scene. Of course, in addition to all the obvious cameos like John Krasinski's long in-demand casting as a bowl of spaghetti, there's Professor X showing up, played by Patrick Stewart, and that toaster he was riding in was a somewhat clunky version of the hover chair he uses in the 90s X-Men cartoon, which is itself getting a Disney Plus continuation in 2023. If you didn't immediately make the connection, this entrance is also accompanied by Danny Elfman's interpretation of that show's Earworm theme song. Presumably, this is all just to get people really pumped for that X-Men series, which does include a lot of the original voice cast coming back, so pretty rad. Now, Patrick Stewart is one of 2 Star Trek captains up on that obnoxious Illuminati stage, by the way. Black Bolt is portrayed by Anson Mount, the same actor who played the character in that Inhuman show we all forgot the same day it premiered. He's also Captain Pike in Star Trek Strange New Worlds, itself a spin-off from his appearance in Star Trek Discovery. Considering he was Captain Kirk's predecessor, he's also canonically the oldest captain in the scene, so that's pretty dope. Now, one of my theories as to how Wanda will come back is that she'll be saved from death by a resident of Mount Wundagore. This is because in the comics, Mount Wundagore, in addition to just being really fun to say, is a pretty major component of various characters' backstories, Wanda included. It's also the place where Chthon wrote the Darkhold, which is of course analogous to him carving it out atop the mountain. The most notable resident of Mount Wundagore is the High Evolutionary, who is essentially Marvel's version of Dr. Moreau. And his, you see, look, that's 1-to-1. You know, is it Marlon Brando or is it a giant machine man? I can't tell. And his cow-woman hybrid Bova is the person who delivers babies, Wanda and Pietro, within the High Evolutionary's home. It could be that the MCU version of the High Evolutionary rescues Wanda and takes her to a nearby town or base, and maybe, just maybe, that's where we'll get our version of Magneto. Or not, probably not. I'm just paid to make up nonsense sometimes. Either which way, the High Evolutionary is rumored to be a character in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, meaning my guess is probably meaningless, and Mount Wundagore isn't nearly as important as I think it is. This is all pointless. I'm terrible at my job. One easier reference to spot, Earth 616 is the name given to the MCU's primary universe by Earth 838's Christine. Now this has caused a bit of a kerfuffle amongst some sticklers in the fan base, since the official designation for the MCU is Earth 19999. But here's the thing. 1, that's a mouthful and sounds dumb out loud. 2, it's a reference for fans. And 3, Christine is an alternate universe character, meaning that she could just be using an alternate name meant to apply to how Earth 838 designates the MCU's world. And 4, it doesn't matter. That said, good on Mysterio for guessing the name of the MCU's multiversal designation.
This is Earth, Dimension 616. I'm from Earth 833.
Now back to Mount Wundagore for a sec. Those minions who Wanda gets as built-in servants at her new summer home are reminiscent of how the evil god Chthon is presented in the comics. Basically just really beefy Cthulhus. Now one reference seemingly tailor-made for Miles Teller if John Krasinski didn't work out is when Reed Richards is referred to as being a part of the Baxter Foundation. In the comics, the Fantastic Four work out of the Baxter Building, and the only use of the term Baxter Foundation was in that ill-fated 2015 reboot of Fantastic Four. Oh, and remember when Patrick Stewart is walking through that white void and you were like, "Aw, snap, he gonna battle with Wanda." And then that led to, "Ah, snap, he got his neck snapped. Oh my god." Well, if you were paying close attention, you might have noticed WandaVision playing on the TV. We also get at least one musical cue from that show. And one of my favorite references, aside from the Grindhouse releasing one, which by the way, The Swimmer, excellent release, mind-blowing film, definitely worth the pickup. Is Wanda's children watching Oswald the Lucky Rabbit playing on TV. Oswald was basically the precursor to Mickey Mouse, created when Walt Disney's animation studio was still growing, and was eventually taken over completely by Universal after Disney and his staff, including animation god of iWorks, went off to do their own thing and created the eerily similar but far more successful Mickey Mouse. Ew, history, gross. Say, remember in the House of Midlife Crisis Goatee Strange when Christine uses that rad cannon thing to blast away some demons? That's the brazier of Bom Goliath. Brazier? I feel like there's a different way to say that. Whatever. The brazier of Bom Goliath. keep that bust in shape, girls. Which was used in the comics to enhance a spell so that then new Thor, Eric Masterson, could sneak through Mephisto's realm undetected and give him a good butt pounding. Huh. It also shows up briefly for a gag during Strange's fight with Caecilius in the 2016 film. That's a dumb way to say it. In the 2016 film Doctor Strange. I don't know why I wrote it like that. Just the 2016 film. You know, the film from 2016. Come on.
You don't know how to use that, do you?
Some folks, nay a lot of folks, had some questions at the end of No Way Home, specifically as to how Strange's final spell works. While having a bit of post-giant eyeball creature lunch with America Chavez and Wong, Strange tries to explain how he already saved the multiverse with Spider-Man to America, who is quick to ask the most important question: does he shoot webbing out of his butt? Anyway, this scene is a great, quick and easy explanation of what happened. Strange says he doesn't think so regarding the butt webbing, telling us, the audience, that he knows Spider-Man, remembers the primary events of No Way Home, but does not remember Peter Parker. Tasty, yum narrative shorthand. And finally, this is kind of another dumb one, but the finale of Multiverse of Madness features Wanda pulling the old disappear under rubble routine, allowing us a theoretically dramatic ending while leaving the door open for future appearances. For me, it was one of the downsides of the movie. It's a little anticlimactic. But anyway, of course, we all know that Wanda will be back for a redemption arc at some point, but the scene from his own filmography Sam Raimi clearly rips off doesn't have the same open-endedness, specifically that of Doc Ock's death in Spider-Man 2, in which he pulls that whole pier thing down on himself to save the world, or at least New York, and dies drowning. And yet somehow, you know what, dude still came back. Good for him.
Sonic 2 now has the best opening weekend for any video game movie ever, making an astounding $72 million at the box office. As a lifelong Sonic fan, I can't put into words how much this means to me after seeing the franchise go through so many rough patches. Hey, it's Patrice, aka Screen Rant's current Sonic guy, and let's celebrate this achievement by going over 25 things you might have missed in Sonic 2. Also, heads up before going into this list, it's gonna be a little bit light on the video game references because we've got a video coming up dedicated to all the video game references coming soon, so keep an eye out on that. Oh, and major spoilers ahead, obviously. Alright, let's get it. Dr. Robotnik absorbing the Chaos Energy and transforming into Super Robotnik may have been a surprise to some of you, since the super forms are usually relegated to Sonic and his friends. But this actually isn't the first time this has happened in Sonic media. In a British comic series published by Fleetway Editions simply titled Sonic the Comic, Robotnik also absorbs Chaos Energy and obtains godlike powers. Eggman becomes a god as he can manipulate time, warp reality itself, turn beings into stone, fly. Come on now, he's basically the Sonic Universe Thanos. His official title in the comics is even called God Robotnik. It's not a stretch to believe that the movie may have taken some inspiration from Sonic the Comic, since it's the only other piece of Sonic media where Robotnik himself has this kind of power. The Fleetway series of comics isn't as well known as the Archie or more recent IDW runs, which is why some fans may believe this movie was the first to give Robotnik these abilities. But Fleetway depicts a much darker and more cruel version of Robotnik, so it makes sense that the writers of the comic allowed Eggman to become as powerful as he did in that canon. That's not where the Fleetway comic references end though, because as many fans have pointed out, there may have been a reference to the infamous Fleetway Supersonic. Fleetway Supersonic is an evil transformation of the Hedgehog, resulting from Sonic absorbing evil energy that was held within the Emeralds. In Sonic the Comic, he's depicted as Sonic's more cruel alter ego and is even a main antagonist throughout many story arcs. There's even points where he's having fun and relishes in the idea of taking out all of Sonic's friends. Later in the series, Fleetway Supersonic becomes an entirely separate entity and Sonic is forced to fight an evil version of himself. Well, in Sonic 2, there may have been a little nod to Fleetway Supersonic. When Sonic returns from destroying Robotnik's Death Egg, Knuckles warns everyone that Sonic isn't the same hedgehog that they all knew before, and is now potentially dangerous, hinting at the out-of-control version of Sonic in the comics. But this turned out to be a last-minute fake-out as Sonic was still his chili dog-loving self. But the fact that there was a nod to this obscure piece of Sonic media shows that the people who made this really know the source material. Alright y'all, I'm still super hyped over the inclusion of Shadow the Hedgehog. I really didn't think they would do it this soon, but Hey, I'm happy that they did. I'm not complaining. Upon further review, I actually should have seen this coming because Shadow's post-credit scene was being teased throughout the entire film, with all the different Sonic Adventure 2 references. The most in-your-face reference was the introduction of the military organization GUN, who were created to combat alien threats. Then some of their helicopters even had the SA2 printed on them. Like, come on, they were letting us know that Sonic Adventure 2 was on their mind in the writer's room. What's more is that the Sonic movies aren't the director of the film Jeff Fowler's first foray into the Sonic franchise. As we all know, he's a big fan of the Blue Blur, which is a huge reason as to why the movies have been working so well. His dedication to making sure the fans are happy with the project made for them literally saved the Sonic movie, and we probably wouldn't be here discussing the second one without Fowler's contribution. But he's also credited to have worked on the CGI cutscenes from the Shadow the Hedgehog video game, so I'm sure being able to bring Shadow into this universe must have been a dream come true for this man. Shadow's reveal in the post-credit scene also looked very similar to his reveal in the 2003 platformer Sonic Heroes, one of my favorite Sonic games. I'm not afraid to say it, I loved Sonic Heroes. In the post-credit scene, we see Shadow rising from the ground in his cryogenically frozen chamber, and when he awakens, he looks straight into the camera. In Sonic Heroes, while Rouge is searching for Eggman's secret treasure, she awakens Shadow, and while he's not rising from the ground, he still has that iconic intimidating stare right into the camera after waking up. Makes me wonder if they might possibly bring Rouge into the next film. But if any other characters are going to show up in Sonic 3, Amy is probably most likely next up. Whoever else they decide to bring into the films, we can trust they're going to adapt them as faithfully as possible, because they're already doing that with the characters we have now. The writer's room is not afraid to add in even the tiniest of details of these characters' personalities, as illustrated by the fact that they even added Sonic and Knuckles' favorite foods. Now we all know Sonic's favorite food is chili dogs, and it's awesome that they kept that consistent with his character. But a lesser known fact is that Knuckles' favorite food is grapes, a fact that's not referenced much in a lot of Sonic media besides his character profiles. Oh hey, there's actually a pretty well-known YouTuber who makes a cameo in this film. No, it's not the entirety of the Screen Rant crew, not that anybody asks for that. During the scene where Tom is failing miserably at volleyball against Rachel's GUN husband and his boys, YouTuber Preston makes a quick cameo as one of the players on Tom's team. He even has a whole video covering his day on set where he got to meet actor James Marsden and actress Tika Sumpter. Now if you're like me, who's admittedly a bit uncultured in the new popular YouTube sphere, this scene might not have made much sense to you when you first saw it. I know I was wondering, why is the camera hanging on this guy for so long? But it all makes sense now. No disrespect to Preston. Congratulations on making it into the movie, man. You're living the dream of the entire Sonic fan base. Okay, I just thought of something. While there is one Archie Comics reference that I'm going to cover a bit later, there's probably not any Archie Comics storyline references because of all the legal reasons that serialization had to stop. But Fleetway Sonic is probably fair game to draw some inspiration from, which is why there is another reference to those comics when the film explored Knuckles' backstory. In Sonic the Comics, it's explained that the Echidna tribe must protect the emeralds from the Drakons, who created the emeralds in order to conquer the galaxy. In the films, this relationship is flipped, with the Echidnas becoming too power hungry and the Owls being sworn to keep the emeralds' power out of their hands. It's pretty cool that the Fleetway comics made such a big impact on the cinematic universe. Also, they probably couldn't draw from the Knuckles backstory in the Archie comics because a certain someone might get upset and try to sue. Now hear me out, because this might sound like a reach, but this is a theory I saw floating around Reddit and it makes a ton of sense when you start to think about it. Longclaw's story is very similar to Chaos's from Sonic Adventure 1. They're both the first guardians of the Master Emerald and were both attacked by the Echidna clan. The difference for now is that after the attack, Chaos became consumed with rage and turned into the energy monster antagonist from Sonic Adventure. With Longclaw, we don't fully know what happened to her after the attack, so we could possibly be seeing her taking the route of Chaos by transforming into Chaos at a later part in the series. That would make the stakes of the story very high, as Sonic would be fighting his mother and Knuckles against the person who took out his father. I was sold more on this theory when I considered that the entire Echidna clan was wiped out and Longclaw was the only one there to fight them. Like, was she really able to take out all of them on her own? Let's just see how this one plays out, because I don't think we're done with that storyline just yet. Sonic's attic room is a culmination of everything that makes Sonic Sonic, with references to speed and fun little childish things spread throughout. His room is a really good representation of his character. Like we saw in the first movie, Sonic loves other fast characters like the Flash. Well, he isn't the only fast character Sonic enjoys, because this time Sonic has a Roadrunner sign in reference to the Looney Tunes character who is also known for always outrunning and outsmarting Wile E. Coyote. A very similar dynamic to that of Sonic and Robotnik. Or it could just be a reference to actual Roadrunner birds who are also very naturally fast. Sonic's bed may also look a little familiar if you read the Archie comics. In the comics, Sonic is always sleeping in a race car themed bed, which we also see in the movie. See, I told y'all there was going to be one Archie reference on this list. That one is safe, but storyline references, not so safe. The writer's room also wasn't afraid to dive into Sonic's meme culture as we saw in the first movie, when the infamous Sonic the Hedgehog was drawn by Green Hill's local conspiracy theorist. Well, guess what, y'all? Sonic is back and better than ever in Sonic 2, this time appearing as a way to distract Tom when Sonic is out irresponsibly taking care of bad guys. I love that they keep the Sonic gag going and hope to see the crudely drawn version of Sonic in the third film as well. Lots of fans have also pointed out that the Ugandan Knuckle memes of all things is referenced in the film when Knuckles first appears. After Robotnik takes out the other strange human looking aliens and Knuckles appears looking for the source of energy sent out by Sonic's quill, Robotnik responds to Knuckles' inquiry of where he got that power by saying he could show him the way. I honestly missed this one on my first watch. It's a bit more subtle, but honestly, that's probably the only way they could go about referencing one of the most well-known Sonic memes without it being too on the nose. Ben Schwartz is the actor who brings Sonic to life in the live-action universe, and honestly I don't think anyone else would be able to pull off this interpretation of Sonic. But this isn't Schwartz's first acting rodeo, as he's voice acting in shows like BoJack Horseman, Robot Chicken, and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Though Schwartz has proved his worth when it comes to being a voice actor, he's most known for his acting role in the mockumentary Parks and Recreation as Jean-Ralphio. During Sonic's Home Alone scene, the film takes the opportunity to reference his iconic role when Sonic says the movie Snow Dogs is the worst, singing it in the same cadence as Schwartz's character in Parks and Recreation. I personally haven't watched Parks and Recs yet, but I know all you fans of the series were probably having a field day with that reference. Sonic's dance scene while he was home alone not only referenced Parks and Recreation, but also the 1983 film Risky Business. In fact, the entire dance scene is a reference to Tom Cruise's as they both rock out when their parents are away. Well, Sonic doesn't consider Tom and Maddie his parental figures just yet at this point in the film, but the reference is still there. You guys get what I'm saying. When Sonic took out Robotnik, it looked like he may have been out for good, as he had that classic kids villain fall to your demise scene. Also, he no longer has the Chaos Emeralds, so the possibility that he survived that fall from that high up are pretty slim, let's be honest. But we're talking about Eggman here. He's a staple of the Sonic franchise who has the plot armor of a One Piece character. So they made sure to keep his defeat pretty open-ended. Only reason I'm bringing this up is because Jim Carrey has stated that he intends to retire after Sonic 2. In an interview with Access Hollywood, he says that his chances of returning to the big screen are slim, stating, "It depends. If the Angels bring some sort of script that's written in gold ink that says to me that it's going to be really important for people to see, I might continue down the road. But I'm taking a break, so let's just hope Sonic 3's script inspires Carrey to come back. But if not, the guy has been acting forever now, so he's definitely earned his retirement." Just like its predecessor, there's a lot of pop culture references made throughout Sonic 2. One that you may have remembered from the first movie was that Sonic was a big fan of the Fast and Furious movies for obvious reasons. The second film also contains a small reference to the franchise when Sonic compares his feud with Knuckles to the infamous feud between The Rock and Vin Diesel. A feud that's been going on for over 6 years. Now, if you're familiar with the long-lasting rivalry between Sonic and Knuckles in the games and the comics, then you'll probably agree that Sonic made a pretty fair comparison, except that Sonic and Knuckles are a little bit more friendly with each other than Johnson and Diesel. You know, now that I'm writing this, I'm really realizing how much the Sonic movie makes references that both kids and adults could appreciate throughout the film. One other reference geared towards adults happened during the final cute baseball scene where everybody gets together and Knuckles is just being an absolute icon. If you listen closely to the music playing when Knuckles hits his home run, it's the exact same as the 1984 film, The Natural, in which Robert Redford's character also hits the final home run. That baseball scene is also a callback to the baseball scene in the first film. You know, the one where we get that funny front-facing perspective of Sonic getting emotional about being lonely. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm taking away from the seriousness of that moment. But he did look kind of silly. Well, in Sonic 2, the baseball scene is meant to illustrate Sonic's emotional growth into someone who has a group of friends and a family. It's honestly a super heartwarming scene, and I love that they included this as the conclusion to the second film. Another fun reference they snuck in was the 3D model of Sonic that appeared in Eggman's lab while he was scheming with Knuckles and Stone. While at first glance this 3D model may appear to be nothing more than a way to display the Hedgehog to the bad guy trio, if you look closely, it's actually doing the waiting pose Sonic does in the games when left idle for too long. Remember the Labyrinth Zone from Sonic 1? Yeah, that pain in the butt water level? Well, the temple where the Master Emerald is stored is entirely based off that zone. This reference was confirmed by both Fowler and the end credits animation sprite music video. Everything from the booby traps, color scheme, and complete with a drowning scene, because I'm sure all of us have drowned somewhere in these levels at least once. Yeah, 10-year-old me definitely drowned too many times to count. If you're a fan of the Sonic comics, you'll be delighted to know there's a prequel comic for the Sonic 2 film. If you came out of the film with questions like, how did Agent Stone become the owner of a coffee shop? Or how did Tails find his way to Sonic? Both of these questions and more are answered as the comic explores 5 different storylines starring each of the core casts of the film. Alright, now get ready for this. One very interesting thing about the prequel comic though was that Espio and Vector can be seen in the background of the Knuckles storyline, confirming their existence in the cinematic universe. When will they appear on screen though? My bets are in the Knuckles series, but it's possible they might show up along Shadow in Sonic 3. During the snowboarding scene, Knuckles gets a good hit on Sonic, resulting in the Hedgehog dropping his rings, a quick reference to how the characters do the same thing in the game after taking damage. First thing I thought of when seeing that scene was the ring loss sound effect. Ah, Olive Garden, the proud, shameless sponsor of both Sonic movies. You know, I really can't even be mad at the Olive Garden product placement in this one because the first time it was such a meme that now I'm expecting them to reference the restaurant in every movie in some way. In Sonic 2, the Gun General returns and makes yet another reference to the Olive Garden, keeping consistent with his character's joke in the first film. Here's a quick question for you guys. Which one does Sonic like more, Marvel or DC? My money is on DC solely because of The Flash, but Marvel is probably a close second considering the couple of references made to the MCU specifically throughout the film. The obvious one being the Winter Soldier joke, but the less obvious one was in reference to the moment the Avengers first came together during the Battle of New York. Yep, I'm talking about that iconic 360 shot that can be found in 90% of our Marvel videos. During the final battle with Eggman, this shot gets recreated with Sonic, Knuckles, and Tails being the center instead of the Avengers. Except this time the camera doesn't quite move in a smooth motion and is quite jaggy to better reflect the speed of the Sonic heroes. Now I know we missed some things, and keep in mind that we're going to go over all the video game references in a separate video, but let us know about some interesting things you noticed throughout the film in the comments.
Guys, I'm not exaggerating. My heart still racing from the moment that we see the Batmobile start up for the first time. And now I have to try and focus and do a video on 25 things you missed in the Batman? Okay, I'm gonna give it a try, but I'm still giddy as a school child right now. It's all so awesome. Anyway, here we go with 25 things that you missed in the Batman. And yes, there are going to be heavy spoilers in this video, so this goes without saying, you have been warned. Let's go. While the Riddler might be the primary antagonist in the movie, we do see a number of other rogues in Batman's gallery make an appearance, such as the Penguin, Carmine Falcone, and even a cameo from Barry Keoghan's new iteration of the Joker. But the movie also makes subtle references to other Batman villains in the cards that the Riddler leaves for Batman. For example, the first card features an owl, which is likely a nod to the sinister, shadowy organization, the Court of Owls, which by the way were first seen in Scott Snyder's new 52 graphic novel of the same name. The Court of Owls is made up of Gotham's elite and rules the city in secret and uses its legion of assassins, known as the Talons, to take out anyone who gets in their way. this reference bears even more significance as Robert Pattinson hinted that the Court of Owls could be the villains in a sequel. As we mentioned though, the other cards also pay reference to other Batman villains, with the second card featuring a mad scientist, which could be seen as a reference to Hugo Strange. The third has a woman on it who looks a lot like Poison Ivy. The fourth has a set of eyes that looks like the Cheshire Cat, which can be taken as a reference to the Mad Hatter, while the fifth card includes a boy with a puppet, which is likely a nod to the puppet Scarface. While the Batman doesn't make many references to the broader world of DC outside of Batman and Gotham, with the likes of Metropolis never getting a shout out, there is a reference to a place that DC fans should be familiar with. At the end of the movie, as Batman and Catwoman go their separate ways, Selina says that she's going out of town for a while and possibly headed to Bloodhaven. In DC lore, Bloodhaven is a New Jersey city between Gotham and Atlantic City, and it's the place where Nightwing sets up camp after he decided to split from his partner, Batman. Now, the Batman movie takes inspiration from a number of Batman comic books, including Hush, The Long Halloween, Year One, Ego, Zero Year, and Earth One, and we are going to go through the references to the comic books one by one, starting off with Hush. The story follows a mysterious figure known as the titular Hush. Now, Hush has a vendetta against Batman and the Waynes, and systematically sets out to make Bat's life a living hell, and the Riddler plays an important part in the story. The Riddler's mask and general outfit do resemble that of Hush, as well as his personal feud with the Waynes, but the most direct reference to Hush comes during the Riddler's video on Thomas Wayne and how he tried to silence a reporter who was planning on airing out dirt that he had on his wife Martha during Thomas Wayne's mayoral campaign. During this video, the word hush money can be seen on screen as the Riddler's plan begins to unravel. As we mentioned, The Long Halloween is another comic book that inspired not only this movie, but Christopher Nolan's Dark Knight trilogy, with the director saying that it's one of the most cinematic graphic novels of all time. The Long Halloween follows a secretive serial killer, known only as Holiday, who murders members of Carmine Falcone's crew on particular holidays, with the first one being Halloween. The Batman also starts with a murder on Halloween, although the events of the movie only take place for a week as opposed to months like the comic book, meaning it's more like the short Halloween than anything. Also, the storyline of Thomas Wayne saving Carmine Falcone's life after being shot in the chest is something that is featured in The Long Halloween. Moving on from one comic book masterpiece to another, Frank Miller's Year One also served as an inspiration for the tone and style of the movie, with Zoe Kravitz, Selina Kyle looking very similar to the one seen in that comic book. Speaking of Selina, in Year One, Catwoman scratches the side of Carmine's face, resulting in claw scars for the remainder of the comic book arc. This is mirrored in a similar scene in The Batman, when Catwoman and Carmine get into a fight, leaving him with similar marks on his face until his eventual death. Also, this one might be a little bit contentious, but the framing of the diner where the Riddler is waiting for the police to capture him, yeah, that gives me some Nighthawks by Edward Hopper vibes. This would make sense, as it also served as inspiration for the artwork behind the diner scene in Year One, where Gordon embarks on a steamy affair with his colleague, Sergeant Sarah Essen. Another comic book to be referenced in The Batman is Earth One, with the reveal of Martha Wayne's lineage as Arkham. Like in the movie, in Earth One, her last name is Arkham before marrying Thomas Wayne, and it's the first time in live action where Martha has actually been seen as a member of the founding family of Gotham. As we mentioned, Ego also has an influence, with Reeves saying, quote, "I wanted to get into the mindset of the character and I wanted to think of the psychology for me. I think one of the cool deep dive ones was Darwin Cook's Ego. He's confronting the beast that is Batman, and there's a kind of duality." End quote. Now, while the big Nolan-style climax of the Riddler planning to flood Gotham didn't quite feel tonally in keeping with the noir-style crime thriller that the first 2 and a bit hours had been dedicated to, fans of the comic book Zero Year would have understood why it happened. In that storyline, the Riddler also manages to flood Gotham, but it goes one step further, with him essentially turning the city into an apocalyptic wasteland, with the Riddler then taking control of what was Gotham. As of right now, we don't know whether or not Gotham will stay underwater, but despite the Riddler being behind bars, the ending of the movie feels very similar to this character arc. Moving away from the comic book references now and onto the nods to the brilliant but campy 1960s series starring Adam West, which Matt Reeves admitted he had a soft spot for. In Bruce Wayne's apartment, we see many gothic furnishings, but one of the most notable is the bust of the famous playwright William Shakespeare. Of course, this is a reference to the 1960 series with Bruce Wayne and Dick Grayson flipping up the head of a Shakespeare bust and toggling a hidden switch that activated a secret door behind a bookcase that would of course lead them down to the Batcave. Another reference to Adam West in the Batman series is in the shape of the nose on Batman's mask. While a majority of recent iterations of Batman have opted to go with a more pointed nose, Robert Pattinson's looks more rounded and snout-like, which is similar to the one sported by Adam West in the series, although the eyebrows are nowhere to be seen. Also, random question, did anyone else think that the criminal who robbed the convenience store at the beginning of the movie was reminiscent of a Nightmare Before Christmas character? I mean, this would make sense, as that movie was directed by Tim Burton, who also directed the 1989 Batman movie and Batman Returns, so perhaps it was a subtle nod. One of the key locations to show up in the movie is the Iceberg Lounge, the nightclub where the Penguin spends most of his time holed up, and the club acts as a location for the city's main crime bosses to meet up and get up to nefarious deeds. This is something taken straight out of the comics, with the Iceberg Lounge also having the exact same purpose, and it was also seen in the video game Arkham City, and it is known as the home base of the Penguin, so expect to see more of it in the Penguin spin-off series. Another famous Gotham locale referenced in the movie is Blackgate Penitentiary, where Penguin wishes Falcone a good night in the prison. Blackgate in the comics is usually exclusively for the most dangerous criminals, and it's traditionally located on a small island in the Gotham Bay, and it's also the maximum security prison that Bane helped the convicts escape from in The Dark Knight Rises. So we all caught the cameo from the Joker. I mean, the laugh gave it away, but did everyone catch the cameo from Batman's trusty sidekick Robin? Well, kind of. At the beginning of the movie, as Batman beats the living crap out of a gang of thugs wearing skeleton paint on their faces, one of the members is hesitant about getting involved. That member is played by none other than Jay Lycurgo, who DC fans might recognize as Tim Drake in the Titans TV series. Of course, Tim Drake ends up becoming the third iteration of Robin in the comics, and it could potentially pave the way for Lycurgo to play the character in the Batverse. Although, I want to note this, I wouldn't put my money on it. Back to the comic book references now. Everyone knows that Catwoman's real name is Selina Kyle, but one thing that is not so clear is who her parents are. Now, in the movie, it's revealed that her father is none other than crime boss Carmine Falcone, which was a little bit of a shock, but it's not the first time that it's been alluded to that Falcone is her dad. In the comic book miniseries Catwoman, When in Rome, Selina Kyle comes to believe that her father might be Falcone, although she's never actually able to find conclusive proof. On to some of those Bat gadgets now. As Batman races back to his apartment after figuring out that he, aka Bruce Wayne, is the Riddler's next target, he calls Alfred to try and save him. As he calls, we see an old-fashioned phone with lights ringing in the manor. Now, while it's by no means a dead ringer, and yes, pun very much intended, this can be seen as a reference to the 1960 series bright red phone, along with some of the older designs in the comics. Also, the Batarang made an appearance, with it being revealed that the emblem on Batman's chest is one big Batarang. Now, while we know Catwoman's real name is Selina Kyle and Batman's real name is Bruce Wayne, the Riddler has gone by multiple names. Although his most famous alias is Edward Nygma, which of course can be shortened to Enigma. And of course, the movie chooses to do away with this name, giving him the more grounded name of Edward Nashton, which is a name he also had in the comics before he changed his last name to Nygma. Another ID card says Patrick Parker, which is also an alias that the villain has used in the comics. He's mentioned by name throughout, but we don't actually get to see the other one of Gotham's major mobsters, Sal Maroni. In the comics, Maroni is often seen as the biggest rival for Carmine Falcone, and in The Long Halloween, the two suspect each other of being behind the holiday murders. Maroni does have some pretty important history in the comic books, as it was him that splashed acid into Harvey Dent's face, turning him into the villain Two-Face. Maroni was played by Eric Roberts in The Dark Knight, but I would love to see him show up in a Batman sequel played by a classic gangster actor. My vote would be Joe Pesci. Come on. We've talked about some of the comic books that inspired the movie, but now let's talk about the movies that inspired it as well. In terms of the story, David Fincher's crime thrillers Zodiac and Seven are obvious influencers, but Reeves said that he was also inspired by Martin Scorsese's Taxi Driver, and he would listen to the soundtrack while working on the script. Reeves also said that his main inspiration for Colin Farrell's Penguin wasn't any iteration from the comics, but actually the character Fredo in The Godfather. This movie provided us with a more raw, muscle car version of the Batmobile that hasn't been seen before in live action, and while it still turns heads, it's a lot more subtle and stealthy than other versions of Batman's classic ride, especially Bale's. This version of the Batmobile drew influence from the 1970s Batman comics by Neil Adams, where the Batmobile was a fairly normal-looking car that Batman drove for stealth purposes. Before he was Batman, or even a lighthouse wiki that hated Willem Dafoe's goddamn farts, Robert Pattinson was known for his roles as Cedric Diggory in the Harry Potter series and Edward Cullen in Twilight, which may or may not have been referenced in the Batman. In one line, Penguin says, quote, "Mr. Vengeance here, he doesn't bite," end quote, which may or may not have been a nod to Pattinson's vampire days. Maybe it's a coincidence, but I like to think that it was intentional. Another reference that is a little bit contentious is the one for Venom, and no, I'm not talking about the Marvel character. As Batman looks down and out, he injects himself with some green liquid which acts like an adrenaline shot and helps him beat the living crap out of one of the Riddler's goons. The liquid in the vial looked very similar to Venom from the comics, which was the same substance that gave Bane his superhuman abilities. This could be paving the way for Bane to show up in the Batverse, and perhaps he'll be portrayed as some Venom addict that got super jacked. Who knows? Paul Dano absolutely crushed it as the Riddler, and his work in There Will Be Blood, 12 Years a Slave and Prisoner certainly led him onto the path to playing this iconic character. But there was one performance of Dano's that led Matt Reeves to writing the character specifically for Dano: his portrayal of Beach Boys frontman Brian Wilson in Love and Mercy. Speaking about it, Reeves said, quote, "That character, he's caught up in his artistry and he struggles to communicate with those around him. That was spiritually connected to the idea of this isolation that the Riddler felt. The Riddler is a product of our time, the way that people become isolated online and retreat to mental activities that substitute for not having contact," end quote. Of course, one of the most famous lines from the movie is, "I am vengeance," and the word quickly becomes associated with our Pat's version of the character, despite it being used by other iterations of Batman in the past. In fact, the working title for this movie was Batman Vengeance, until it eventually dropped away. However, the last two punches in the train station scene where the victim is already unconscious and Batman says, "I'm vengeance," yeah, that was Pattinson's idea, and improvised, saying, quote, "I wanted to say it as the guy is losing consciousness so it goes into his dreams. I wanted his future to be really, really damaged," end quote. Nirvana's classic song Something in the Way is used multiple times throughout the movie to great effect as it tonally matches with this iteration of Batman. That's because Robert Pattinson's Bruce Wayne is inspired by Nirvana's frontman, Kurt Cobain. Writer-director Matt Reeves was listening to Nirvana when he wrote the first act, saying, quote, "That's when it came to me that rather than make Bruce Wayne the playboy version we've seen before, there's another version who had gone through a great tragedy and became a recluse. Kurt Cobain had a relationship with fame where being famous was not his goal. He loved music, but the idea of being famous for music was a double-edged sword for him." And that made me think of Robert Pattinson, actually. Because Rob is a very private person himself and doesn't necessarily like the part of being recognized everywhere as an actor. End quote. Back to Dano now. According to Matt Reeves, the scene in Gotham Hall where the Riddler communicates with Batman via livestream took 200 takes to pull off, most of which came at Dano's own request. In an interview, Reeves said, quote, "Paul goes, okay, let me try one where I'm off camera and I stick my head in. Let me try one where I'm already sitting. He's directing this one-person play on an iPhone," end quote. In fact, Dano's commitment to the character was so intense that he tried on hundreds of pairs of glasses to find the right ones. And he came to set on the first day with his head wrapped in plastic wrap, with the actor saying, quote, "The thoroughness of this person, the almost maniacal detail that he puts into plotting, I was like, okay, well maybe I should just shave all my body hair, so there's no evidence. I'm gonna wrap my head in saran wrap," end quote. At one point in the movie, Penguin refers to the Batman as Zorro. This is important, as in many versions of Batman's origins, the Wayne family was leaving a theater showing of Zorro when they were murdered. Also, Zorro was acknowledged by Bob Kane and Bill Finger as one of the main influences for Batman. And finally, if you stayed around until after the credits, you may have been disappointed that all you were given was a message from the Riddler that said goodbye. But that website, RATAALADA.com, that's actually a functioning website that you can visit right now and partake in some riddles and puzzles. Maybe it's got a new Wordle on there, huh?
Let's go, baby! Let's go! Let's go!
Jordan Peele is back with another movie to haunt our dreams and make a different animal creepy. And if anyone asks me to get in a cage with a chimp, my answer is definitely gonna be nope. Peele's latest is filled with Easter eggs, symbolism, and hidden meanings. And that's why we are gonna try to unpack 25 things you might have missed in Nope. And yes, there will be spoilers in this video.
Hey, you're not gonna get all unglued again, are you?
No! So as you know, Nope focuses on the Haywood family and their business as animal wranglers, which is led by Daniel Kaluuya's OJ, replacing his father who dies at the beginning of the movie, and his sister Emerald, played by Keke Palmer. The movie claims that the Haywoods are the descendants of Alistair E. Haywood, who rode the first horse in the first moving picture ever made, created by Edward Muybridge in 1878. While the movie is real, Alistair E. Hayward is actually a creation of Peele's for the purpose of the movie. But the horse in the movie was indeed ridden by a black jockey, but sadly the record of their name is lost in history. The movie opens up with a Bible verse, Nahum 3:6, which says, "I will cast abominable filth upon you, make you vile, make you a spectacle." This reinforces Peele's skewering of spectacles and voyeurism. More on that later. But the Bible verse has greater meaning and context. In the verse, the Assyrian city of Nineveh is referenced, and it is described as a vile and reputable place. Think Mos Eisley, with the verse reading, "City of blood, full of lies, full of plunder, never without victims." A place with galloping horses and jolting chariots, full of bodies of the dead, and it talks about the city's destruction and how God will chew the city up and spit it out, just like the city did to its people. This can be seen as a reference to Hollywood, a place full of lies, galloping horses, etc., and spectacles that chews people up and spits them back out. But instead of God consuming them, it's a giant saucer-shaped alien. Even more interesting is that the verse that comes before it, Jonah and the whale, seeing the UAP in Nope is essentially a flying saucer whale, and a little bit jellyfish and xenomorph in final form. It once again reinforces the Bible imagery that Peele sets up at the beginning of the movie. As the movie progresses, it is eventually broken up into chapters, named after the animals that are focused on in that chapter. What you might have missed, though, is all, bar one, die in the respected chapter. Ghost and Clover are consumed by Jean Jacket in their chapter, Gordy is shot and killed after his rampage in the flashback, and Jean Jacket implodes after consuming the giant inflatable man at the end of the movie. The only one who doesn't die in their chapter is Lucky, who we can say is pretty accurately named. One of the most famous shots in anime, or movies in general, is the motorcycle slide shot from the cinematic masterpiece that is Akira, which has been referenced and parodied ever since its release in 1988. Nope, of course, is no different. At the end of the movie, as Emerald escapes on the electric bike, she performs the famous slide. What's more is that it seems it essentially bookends the film. As M says in her speech in the beginning of the film that she can ride motorbikes, a skill that obviously came to good use at the end of the movie. Without summer blockbusters like Jaws, more on that later, and Independence Day, it's unlikely that Nope would have ever hit the big screen. So it's no surprise that the film pays reference to the movies that came before it. In the creepy scene where the trio of aliens confront OJ in the stable, he ends up punching one of them in the face. It is certainly a reference to the scene where Will Smith clocks an alien in the face in Independence Day.
Welcome to Earth.
It is impossible to talk about this movie and not know all the references to the major blockbusters of Steven Spielberg. Peele has been labeled as the modern-day Spielberg, and has seemingly taken that title literally with Nope, blending together various elements of Spielberg's work. First off is Close Encounters of the Third Kind, which has UAPs and aliens at its core, with the spacecraft also using clouds as camouflage, while the mock aliens we see look similar to the ones we see in Close Encounters, although they kind of look like chimps, which might refer to Junpei's repressed trauma. I love that name. Of course, there are some parallels that can be drawn between Nope and Jaws, with both focusing on three people trying to take down a giant hungry monster that is trying to eat them. Another is Jurassic Park, not only the Gordy scene being reminiscent of the famous kitchen scene with the raptors, but also the idea of trying to contain nature and create spectacles out of wild creatures, but finding it all going horribly wrong. There is even a twisted nod to E.T. and the whole Gordy and Junpei hand shot, where Gordy reaches out to fist bump Junpei after the rampage, although I maintain that E.T. is creepier than Jean Jacket. One of Peele's signature flourishes as an auteur is the Peele stare, where the subject looks into the camera and breaks the fourth wall. It also makes a return in Nope, although in a slightly modified form, with M providing the stare at the end of the movie after triumphantly defeating Jean Jacket. Acronyms play a big part in the movie, with Nope itself likely an acronym for Not of Planet Earth. Another example, though, is in the scene where Angel talks to OJ about how UFOs are no longer the acronym used for potential alien craft, but UAPs, which stand for Unidentified Aerial Phenomenon. This shift from object to phenomenon could actually be seen as a piece of foreshadowing, as at first the movie leads us to believe that Jean Jacket is a spacecraft or object, but is actually revealed to be a living, breathing creature or phenomenon. Although, one theory we have is that UAP could actually stand for something else entirely, Universal Apex Predator. Now, I have no evidence to support this, but it makes sense, no? One of the eeriest scenes in the movie comes when blood rains down on the Haywood house after Jean Jacket consumes Junpei and his audience, and feels like the first one of the plagues in Egypt, and yet again, reinforcing the Bible imagery. It also feels like a nod to a number of horror movies, in particular Evil Dead 2013 and War of the Worlds 2005, as well as the Bleeding House in the Amityville Horror, and the Elevator of Blood in The Shining. The list goes on, let me tell you. As mentioned, the movie is peanut butter and jam-packed full of foreshadowing. For instance, the opening scripture can be taken as a reference to an alien attack, but the movie is rife with imagery and throwaway lines that plant the seeds to a major twist. For example, the opening scene of Gordy going on a rampage after being used for a spectacle is what happens with Jean Jacket and the people of Jupiter's Claim, and the cycle of trauma that Junpei experiences as a kid comes full circle. Additionally, the reason for Gordy going into a rampage is down to the release of balloons, which mirrors how Emerald eventually destroys the alien by releasing a giant balloon in the sky and tricking it into consuming it. Also, we don't know it at the time, but the opening shot is filmed through the POV of the alien's mouth, and it's shot in the exact same way that the people of Jupiter's Claim are sucked up later on in the movie. Another hint to the idea of this giant alien consuming and eating people is the line that OJ says early on in the film, saying he has mouths to feed. Also, might be my eyes and over-imagining mind playing tricks on me, but do we see Jean Jacket in the first shot of the house? I think we do, baby. Eyes have often been the focus of a number of auteurs, such as Kubrick and Hitchcock, and Peele as well, with eyes holding a reoccurring theme in Nope. We see a number of close-ups of creature eyes, such as Lucky's, as well as Jean Jacket's. We think, anyway. It's not entirely clear. And there is this whole obsession with watching things and capturing truth through film. The Haywoods are determined to get an image of the creature, and finally do at the very end of the film. And there is this reoccurring motif of our truth being told to us by what we see. Voyeurism is a main theme throughout the movie, such as the audience at Jupiter's Claim, and the fact that Junpei even calls the UAP the viewers. The way OJ avoids being eaten is by not looking into its eyes, just like a wild animal, or a T-Rex in Jurassic Park. Once again, showing the importance of eyes in this movie. Seeing as the Haywoods family have a long history in Hollywood, it is no surprise that there are a number of movie posters on the wall of their home. But one of the most notable has to be the 1972 Western Buck and the Preacher. The movie follows Buck and Preacher, who at first dislike each other, but end up fighting a common enemy, and is something that can be related to the movie, with OJ and M. Not disliking each other exactly, but at least aloof with one another, until they unite to fight the common enemy of Jean Jacket. Western motifs are prevalent throughout the movie, especially with the final shot of OJ on a horse at the end of the movie. One of the most obvious Easter eggs is one for the 2002 Mummy spin-off movie and Dwayne Johnson's first major leading role, the Scorpion King, which was also acted as OJ's first ever job on a movie set. OJ wears the hoodie at the end of the movie when confronting Jean Jacket, and obviously feels sentimental about the time working with his father, who despite being dead, still looms large in the background. But, I can't believe I'm saying this, but could Scorpion King also hold a symbolic significance as well? Scorpion King is set in the ancient city of Gomorrah, which, alongside Sodom, is a famous city in the Bible that was destroyed by God due to its wickedness. Could this Scorpion King reference once again be a nod to Bible imagery? Just maybe, baby. Just maybe. One of the posters for Nope is the VFX ball being held up to the eye of the horse, Lucky, that we see in the scene early on in the movie. Now this scene is foreshadowing of an animal reaching its limits of exploitation and lashing out in a violent way, something which Jean Jacket does to the people of Jupe's claim. But the imagery of the eye is reminiscent, to me anyway, of the infamous eye scene in the 1929 movie Un Chien Andalou by Louis Buñuel and Salvador Dali. The scene in question shows a woman's eye being cut out, and to achieve the shot, the filmmakers actually used the eye of a cow. While it's not quite a horse, it could be a nod to the scene and the use of practical visual effects in early cinema. Angel is the technically minded Fry's employee who helps OJ and M set up the cameras around the ranch and hunt aliens. And like apparently all technically minded people, he has an interest in crypto. If you look in the background of his apartment, he has a rack of processors which are rigged up to his computer in order to mine crypto. It's not an important detail, but worth mentioning nonetheless. One of the most irritating characters in the movie has to be the camera-obsessed paparazzi motorcyclist who tries to exploit the Haywoods and the tragedy that happened in their neighborhood ranch by recording them. Now, while we never hear his name, or see his face for that matter, in the credits, he is listed as Ryder Muybridge, an obvious reference to Edward Muybridge, who created the first motion picture and the one whose name is remembered, unlike the jockey who actually rode the horse. Now, thankfully, Gordy's Home isn't a real sitcom, but the violent rampage referenced is based on a real event. Seeing as they are wild animals, even trained chimps have been known to kill humans unprovoked, and they easily have the physical strength to tear a person's face off. That's exactly what happened to Charla Nash, who was attacked by a chimpanzee named Travis seemingly for no reason. Travis was an animal actor starring in a number of commercials, but ended up attacking Nash after he saw her holding his favorite toy. Nash has gone through a number of facial reconstruction surgeries, and has even appeared on the Oprah Winfrey Show, something which is referenced throughout Nope. Wearing a hat and veil which looks similar to the one worn by Mary Jo Elliott in the movie. The attack feels very similar to Tilikum the Orca, who is the subject of the documentary Blackfish, who ended up killing 3 people while held in captivity, and also reinforces the whale and wild imagery found throughout Nope. Another movie reference Nope makes throughout a particular shot is a homage to the classic film Wizard of Oz. In the shot where OJ stands in front of the Haywood family home, a humble isolated farmhouse, and looks at the cyclone created by the UAP, it looks very much like the shot of Dorothy Gale and the cyclone in the Wizard of Oz. Nope makes a number of references to pop culture throughout the movie, such as the aforementioned Oprah Winfrey Show, as well as the reference to real videos released by the US Navy of UAPs. The video in question, which was originally leaked by Angels and Airwaves and former Blink-182 singer and guitarist, and resident UFO hunter Tom DeLonge, and his company To the Stars, showcases a number of UAPs caught by grainy footage and were officially declassified by the Navy in 2021. It's kind of weird that nobody talks about these videos more. Maybe that's what the aliens want. Throughout the movie, we see multiple band shirts, including the Jesus Lizard. There's a Bible reference again, Earth, and Rage Against the Machine, all of which seem to thematically match the movie. Speaking of song choices though, not only are we treated to a wonderfully weird slowed down version of Sunglasses at Night, but there's also a reference to the 1950 song The Purple People Eater by Sheb Wooley. The song describes a creature coming out of the sky and the narrator asking not to be eaten by the creature, although it turns out that he only eats things that are the color purple, hence the name. One of the most famous alien movies of recent times has to be Denis Villeneuve's 2016 movie Arrival. And the final flowing design of Jean Jacket and the heptapods in Arrival are kinda similar. Both blend with the organic and the industrial and also have a more fluid structure that can be changed, unlike the typical gray aliens with big eyes that we have become accustomed to. Another movie Nope shares similarities to is John Carpenter's masterpiece, The Thing, as both focus on the extraterrestrial creatures that can change form and consume those around them. But there is an even more straightforward connection. Keith David, who plays OJ and M's father in Nope, as well as Childs in The Thing. Another piece of foreshadowing is the name of the neighboring ranch, Jupiter's Claim, named after the character Junpei played in the fictional movie. While Jupiter gives us images of space and the galaxy, the more interesting choice of word is claim, as it arguably sets up the territorialism of Jean Jacket, who has laid claim to the land. And finally, when going over the safety speech to the crew, M gets one detail wrong: her relationship with Alistar E. Haywood, forgetting to add an extra great and has to be reminded by OJ. It turns out later on in the movie that the reason she got it wrong is that she memorized the speech from her father, with her dad being heard rehearsing the same exact speech with the same exact amount of greats on the VHS tape later on in the film.
Welcome back. The biggest question of Marvel's Phase 4 is also the saddest. How does Wakanda and the MCU move on from the devastating passing of Chadwick Boseman's Black Panther? Wakanda Forever is here and answers that question valiantly, as well as introducing one of the most anticipated characters in all of Marvel Comics, the Submariner known as Namor. Now let's see how deep this thing goes with 25 things you missed in Black Panther Wakanda Forever. While Shuri begins to process her grief, she talks about how T'Challa hid his illness until it was too late to do anything about it. Boseman himself hid his illness from the public, instead choosing to do as much work as his body would allow him to before it took his life, turning in not only stunning performances as the King of Wakanda, but also as Levi in Ma Rainey's Black Bottom and a starring role in the Russo brothers' non-Marvel picture 21 Bridges. Chadwick Boseman's portrayal of the Black Panther loomed large over the MCU as the character and actor became an instant favorite, leaving wide the question of what to do in the wake of his death. Technology has created a bit of an ethical gray area for many franchises to carry over characters after the original actor's passing. Peter Cushing's Grand Moff Tarkin reappears in Rogue One. This is just one example of many. It was decided early on to not digitally recreate Boseman and instead have the film stand as a tribute to his looming presence in the MCU for that brief moment of history. Ultimately, the odd man out in the Marvel movies is the Incredible Hulk starring Ed Norton as Bruce Banner. Later, the Banner character was recasted as Mark Ruffalo. So I'm not sure if that counts, but Black Panther Wakanda Forever is the first sequel in the MCU to not include the titular hero's original actor, except in flashbacks when Shuri is finally able to process her grief without, mentally torturing a small town in New Jersey. Wanda, looking at you. It's no secret that Kevin Feige has long wanted to bring his favorite character Namor to the MCU for a long time. Namor's secret underwater kingdom was first teased all the way back in Iron Man 2, at the same time as Wakanda, as a list of hotspots that S.H.I.E.L.D. was tracking. And clearly S.H.I.E.L.D. forgot to write it down because the CIA doesn't even consider Talokan as a potential culprit in the ocean-based attack. Either way, the core plan for Wakanda Forever didn't change with Boseman's passing, including the tone. Had Boseman lived, T'Challa would have been mourning the 5 years he missed as dust before Namor came by and let him know that opening Wakanda to the world endangered his secret water kingdom. The MCU has only been around for about 14 years, but it's already hard to imagine a cultural landscape without it. Part of that has been due to the MCU being a non-stop content machine. Black Panther Wakanda Forever marks the 30th feature film for the mega franchise. For the ever-important kinda continuity question, we know that this film takes place after Spider-Man No Way Home and after Eternals, and Ryan Coogler said that it takes place around the same time as Thor Love and Thunder and the upcoming Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania. And it's also the end of a phase that has not ended with an Avengers film. As one could imagine, colors are used differently amongst cultures for various meanings and symbolism. The funeral for T'Challa and eventually Ramonda features dancers and mourners in white. This is actually a very common color for mourning across Asian and African cultures, as well as blue and in South Africa even red. The color is meant to symbolize purity and rebirth. Talokan is a sharp departure from the Atlantean world in the comics. Debuting in 1939, Namor beats all other rulers of Atlantis, including Aquaman, to the page. Since that time, however, there have been plenty of pretenders to the Atlantis throne. The ancient Greek philosopher Plato was trying to use the idea of Atlantis as an allegory, but it became a popular location for fictional underwater people. Given the cultural saturation of Atlantis, Namor had to stand out from his distinguished competitors like Arthur Curry, aka Aquaman. Black Panther: Wakanda Forever shifted the focus from Plato's misunderstood allegory and arrived on the shores of the Aztec legend of Tlacopan, the first level of the 13 heavens and the last resting place of victims of floods, drownings, and lightning strikes. In the very intense scene where Namor says his enemies call him Namor, he also says what his people call him. I am not going to try and pronounce that name, but I will say that name is a reference to the Mayan deity that represents trade and support amongst peoples. During the filming of Captain America: Civil War, King T'Chaka had a heart-to-heart with his son. Played by veteran South African actor John Kani, asked in this intimate moment why he was speaking to his son in English. In that moment, the language of Wakanda became the African language Xhosa, Kani's native tongue. With Namor's kingdom of Talokan being based on Mesoamerican mythology and history, actor Tenoch Huerta learned Mayan for the role, as the citizens of Talokan are made up of mostly Mesoamericans fleeing the conquistadors. And speaking of Tenoch Huerta, before being cast as Namor in Black Panther 2, he did not know how to swim. When director Ryan Coogler asked about his swimming skills, he simply responded, "I have yet to drown." After being cast, he took extensive swimming lessons to get up to par. The Talokans of the MCU don't date that far back. According to their story, the people of Talokan took to the water after being led to their own version of the heart-shaped herb in 1571. And that's not an insignificant date. 1571 was the beginning of the Mexican Inquisition. The Catholic monarchs at the time finally conquered the last Muslim holding in the Iberian Peninsula, setting the stage for the forced conversion that was the Spanish Inquisition to make its way to the Mexican territories. Seeing this in full force turns Namor cold towards the surface dwellers. In the comics, his name is supposed to translate to avenging slowly. For the MCU, it's a takeoff from El Niño Sin Amor, meaning the child without love, a nickname given to him by the missionaries. Set designer Hannah Bleacher indicated that the jaws around the throne of Namor are that of a megalodon, a hopefully extinct prehistoric ancestor to the modern shark. Seeing that the Talokan people have only been underwater for about 500 years, I think they got a pretty good chance of not running into one. One of the main hurdles of the film is for Shuri to overcome and process her grief before it consumes her and her nation. Just like in the comic book storyline where Shuri's Black Panther brings Wakanda into conflict with Atlantis and the hot-headed Namor, Shuri's anger has her bringing her country to the brink of a war that not even M'Baku wants a part of. Through M'Baku's counsel, Shuri comes around to the example set by her own brother when he spared M'Baku during a duel. So, like her brother when she has the stubborn Namor beat, she asks him to yield. This is clearly a callback to the first Black Panther film. Being 450 plus years old in a culture that relies heavily on oral traditions is a lot of responsibility. Namor takes it seriously though. Academy Award-winning production designer Hannah Bleacher returns to the franchise, designing the world we see, this time including all of the Mesoamerican influences in the design of Talokan. This includes the pictorial recording of history. At the end of the film, Namor is painting on a wall. This is the recording of the time where Wakanda and Talokan met. With Thanos invading and Wakanda being the front line of defense, it's easy to forget that Wakanda wasn't all peace, love, and pancakes at the end of the first Black Panther. T'Challa had broken century-old traditions by opening up their country to the world after a divide became clear between isolationists, people who wanted Wakanda to help the world, and people who wanted Wakanda to rule it. Black Panther ends in a civil war and eventually pits Okoye against her husband W'Kabi. W'Kabi is played by Daniel Kaluuya, and Kaluuya was set to return for the sequel, but scheduling conflicts arose with the filming of the sci-fi horror epic Nope, directed by Jordan Peele. In Wakanda Forever, we hear Ramonda mention that W'Kabi has been exiled due to taking up arms against the royal family. At 2 hours and 41 minutes, Wakanda Forever takes the number 2 slot for the longest Marvel movie behind Endgame, and edges out Eternals as the longest non-Avengers film. Another young Avenger joins the MCU in the form of Riri Williams, Ironheart. Riri Williams from the comics, like the movie, is a super young genius in the mold of Shuri, who Dominique Thorne originally auditioned for. There, she reverse engineers her own Iron Man suit from using parts of a damaged Mark 41. In contrast to the film, in the comic books, Riri is mentored by Tony Stark, and even takes his place after the Second Civil War finds him in a coma. Without a Tony Stark, Riri takes her mentorship from Shuri in Wakanda Forever. Ryan Coogler is a member of the independent auteurs that make up the MCU's director pool, having made a splash with his movie about the tragic New Year's shooting in Oakland by police officers with Fruitvale Station, and later impressing Sylvester Stallone with his new generation take on the Rocky franchise with Creed. For the first time, the established filmmaker utilized a collection of anamorphic lenses for the filming of Wakanda Forever. These lenses allow for a wider field of view on the same size frame, by distorting the image, which is then meant to be spread out by a projector lens to give an extra widescreen effect. This gives a true cinematic quality and is certainly fitting for this type of picture. The main conflict for the film revolves around what two rulers of vibranium-rich countries want to do about the child genius Riri Williams, who discovered a new way to detect vibranium so advanced even Shuri had a hard time reverse engineering it. Namor wants to get rid of her by any means necessary, but then again, Riri has a Disney Plus series coming out, so that just won't do. Despite Shuri running all out of compassion, she's still her mother's daughter and her brother's sister. Not only that, but as a young genius who has not yet met Peter Parker, she has no real peers. So again, the Wakandan army is drafted to protect one special individual. It's kind of becoming a habit for them. Either way, it might sound familiar as a plot point because director Ryan Coogler was totally inspired by Terminator 2 Judgment Day. In that movie, the T-800 was programmed to protect John Connor for the future, and the T-1000 was programmed to do what the previous T-800 failed to do. Filming extensive underwater sequences takes a great deal of care. Costume designer Ruth E. Carter had to even test materials underwater to see how they moved. And it wasn't just Huerta who had to take swimming lessons, the entire cast needed to be trained in water movement and swimming techniques. The MCU is absolutely full of star-powered AI systems. Paul Bettany plays the voice of Jarvis, later to become Vision, and his respected wife plays the voice of the suit lady Karen in the Spider-Man series. Edith got her voice from No Way Home's editing department with the first assistant editor Dawn Michelle King, and when Jarvis has a bit of an outer body experience, we have Kerry Condon take the place of the AI system known as Friday in the Iron Man suits. And for Shuri's griot, named after the West African role of History Keeper, they turn to a South African who has a couple stories to tell himself, Daily Show host Trevor Noah. While there was a ton of speculation on who would take up the mantle of the Black Panther, the obvious leading choice was T'Challa's genius sister Shuri. But that didn't come without its complications. Being a superhero is hard, even with a dedicated effects team. While attached to a rig that allows actors to do the impossible superhero things that superheroes do, actor Letitia Wright injured her shoulder, shutting down production for about 4 months. However, she says the injury made her stronger as part of the journey to Wakanda Forever. Fans of Rihanna haven't heard from the pop star for the last 6 years, an eternity in pop music culture. Ryan Coogler showed her the trailer for the upcoming film and asked her to contribute to the soundtrack, and she agreed. He theorized that the movie came along at the right time in the singer's life. The song Lift Me Up debuted #1 on the Billboard charts. Namor the Submariner has had near misses with live-action film for about 70 years now. In the 1950s, producers tried to conjure up a TV series about the character, inspired by the popularity of George Reeves' Superman series. In the 1970s, there was another go at making it a series, as comic book shows were all the rage. Unfortunately, it was too similar to the Patrick Duffy show Man from Atlantis, and it was shelved. In 2006, when the MCU was still just a sparkle in Kevin Feige's eye, Terminator Rise of the Machines director John Mastow was tapped to bringing the Submariner to life. life. Lost actor Daniel Dae Kim expressed interest in the role as well as Vin Diesel. But in the end, this would leave Namor's distribution rights with Universal, preventing a solo Marvel film. At the time, there was already a man who seemed to be born in water that captured the public imagination, who was heavily fan-casted. This person was Michael Phelps. And before Wakanda Forever was fully cast, perhaps this was a negotiation technique, but Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson said he was quite frustrated with DC lowering the budget for Black Adam, and supposedly was in talks for Namor in this very film. Now, we all love Hugh Jackman's portrayal of Wolverine, but for many, some still hear the voice of Wolverine as a man with no name, a harsh whisper of a dirty Harry. That's right, Clint Eastwood. But Mr. Eastwood has a way bigger connection to comic books than we just have in our imagination. In 1978, he was approached to don the blue and red of the last son of Krypton in Richard Donner's Superman movie. However, he passed on that, but not because he hates superheroes, but because he had a favorite. He explained to Hero Complex that he was interested in more grounded superheroes. He then said he loved Namor the Submariner, and went on to explain he collected the comic books as a kid. After being cut from the bad guy roster in the first Black Panther, the Submariner was not going to be denied his 70-year march to the live-action screen again, but M'Baku actor Winston Duke was willing to try. M'Baku, aka the White Ape, is one of the Black Panther's longest-running foes. Comic book M'Baku seeks the throne for his own nefarious goals. MCU M'Baku just has a difference in opinion regarding the direction of the nation. Unfortunately for M'Baku's ambitions, the charm that Winston Duke imbued in the character has endeared us towards him. So when Duke campaigned for his character to become the bad guy, he was turned down, instead to fulfill the role of mentor and protector to Shuri.
Rip off your arms and shove them up your butt!
Thor Love and Thunder is out, and boy was it a fun ride. Jam-packed with Guns N' Roses songs, funny bits, a rekindling love relationship, and an epic battle to tie the room together. It made us laugh out loud, it made us tear up, it kept us on the edge of our seats. Heavy spoilers ahead, so please, for the love of God of Thunder, you have been warned. Every Marvel movie is absolutely peanut butter and jam-packed with Easter eggs and references, and Thor Love and Thunder is no different. Thor Love and Thunder took everything that worked with Ragnarok and dials it up to 11, and we believe it handles continuity more effectively than previous installments. They brought back Natalie Portman's Jane Foster as the mighty Thor in an arc lifted directly from Jason Aaron's comic book run. But this time, Jane Foster is no damsel in distress. She is now transformed into a hero in her own right, bringing a rainbow of joy in the MCU and leaving Thor Odinson bewildered as old feelings are reignited. Thor Love and Thunder brings a classic comic book adventure to life, and it's filled to the brim with Easter eggs and references. Let's take a deep dive and take a look at 25 things you might have missed in Thor Love and Thunder. I'm Joey C. Let's go!
Is he asleep? No. I'm pretty sure he's dead.
Christian Bale plays a terrifying take of Gore the God Butcher, and he serves as Thor Love and Thunder's main villain. He is a tortured soul who resents the fact that the gods did not intervene to save the life of his daughter. Love and Thunder adapts Gore's origin story from Jason Aaron's Thor God of Thunder #6 comic book. Although he narrows the focus down solely to the relationship between Gore and his dying daughter, it's a pretty powerful emotional introduction to the movie, ensuring the viewers can fully understand the main villain's motivations for his actions. Speaking of Gore the God Butcher, after his god rejects him, he stumbles upon the Necro Sword, which is an ancient sword originating from the dawn of time that has the power to slay gods. This is actually Gore's traditional weapon in the comics, where he has ultimately been tied to Null, the god of symbiotes. Null created All Black, the Necro Sword, as a weapon that has the ability to slay gods. Interestingly, nothing about Thor Love and Thunder's Necro Swords contradicts the comic book portrayal. Taika Waititi gives New Zealand actor Jonathan Bra a cameo as Rapu, the god whose dismissive attitude towards his worshippers prompts Gore to take up the Necro Sword and slay him. Slay him? I barely know him. Which ignites the chain of events for the movie. Bra worked with Waititi before on What We Do in the Shadows, making this quite an appropriate cameo. It's also important to note that the god Rapu is an original character that was created specifically for Thor Love and Thunder with no basis in the comics. The beautiful Natalie Portman isn't the only previously established Marvel Cinematic Universe character that returns in Thor: Love and Thunder. The Guardians of the Galaxy return, but of course you didn't miss that one. More surprisingly though, secondary characters from the first 2 Thor movies appear in the movie as well. Kat Dennings' Darcy Lewis and Stellan Skarsgård's Eric Selvig are 2 of the only people Jane Foster has told about her cancer. Spoiler. While Jamie Alexandra's Lady Sif is brought back as well. The most unexpected cameo would have to go to Idris Elba, who shows up at the end when Jane finds herself at the gates of Valhalla.
More on that later.
And then the ether stuck itself inside her, and she became...
Bet you didn't think we'd get scientific in this video. Well, we aren't, because I don't even know what this Einstein-Rosen bridge that Jane Foster talks about is. Regardless, Thor: Love and Thunder presents Jane Foster as one of Earth's most celebrated scientists. Jane can't help but give a lecture on the wonderfully confusing Einstein-Rosen bridges theory when she sees another cancer patient reading her own book on the subject. Honestly, Google it, because good God, I'm just a content creator. I don't have much brain power. The Bifrost is the Einstein-Rosen bridge, explaining why Jane has such a good understanding of wormholes. Stormbreaker's power to summon the Bifrost becomes an essential part of the plot, meaning this is a surprisingly significant Easter egg. Now you're probably asking yourself if I understand all this, and to you I would say, not even in the slightest. If you paid even a little bit of attention, you would know that Thor: Love and Thunder heads back to New Asgard, situated in the town of Tønsberg. This real-life place is generally regarded as the oldest town in Norway, and fictionally, its history has been tied to the Asgardians in the MCU. A flashback in Thor reveals that Odin led the Asgardians to war against the Frost Giants in Tønsberg in around 1000 AD, and the Red Skull discovered a cult of Odin worshippers, keeping the Tesseract hidden there in Captain America: The First Avenger. Thor: Love and Thunder seems to confirm a popular fan theory that Odin died near Tønsberg in Thor Ragnarok. Speaking of New Asgard, it was rather funny and amusing to see New Asgard becoming a major tourist attraction. And side note, Ms. Marvel Episodes 1 AvengerCon includes details of tours around Tønsberg. It's wild to see an ice cream store call itself Infinity Cones, because the name of the store sounds like it says You get it. Y'all don't have to explain it to you. Humans have always tended to deal with tragedy with humor, and clearly that trait is shared by Asgardians. While filming Thor Ragnarok, the director, Taika Waititi, famously produced a number of shorts where Thor Odinson lived with a roommate who was named Daryl. These aren't considered canon, and they're deliberately kept out of the MCU timeline on Disney+. But, surprisingly, Daryl, Thor's old roommate, reprises his role in a blink-and-you'll-miss-it moment where he plays a wonderful tour guide. Easter eggs that involve actors are among my favorite. Taika Waititi revisits a trick from Thor Ragnarok, with a group of actors putting on a show that sums up the last film's plot. Matt Damon and Sam Neill return among the actors, reprising their roles as Loki, Thor, and Odin. This time, they're joined by Melissa McCarthy in the role of Hela. It's easy to miss, but Ben Falcone, McCarthy's real-life husband and often director and co-star, appears during the curtain call. One of the funniest bits in Thor: Love and Thunder were the screaming goats. Let me explain a bit more. Thor: Love and Thunder sees Odinson gifted 2 pet goats. In Norse mythology, Thor's chariot is pulled by Teeth Snarler and Teeth Grinder. Marvel adapted the idea in 1976, introducing Thor's goats, Tooth Gnasher and Tooth Grinder.
No, give me that. You have the little one.
Let's dive a bit deeper into some of the victims of Gore the God Butcher, because there's a few juicy deets in there. Thor: Love and Thunder lifts an image straight from the comics when it presents Gore the God Butcher victim Falagar. The scene is brought to life straight from Thor: God of Thunder #3 by Jason Aaron, and it shows the tragic fate of Falagar. The panel is practically brought to life on the big screen, with Korg's presence as the only alteration. In the comics, Falagar was presented as the patron god of the galactic frontier who apparently wrestled black holes for fun, which just sounds so badass. We love an awkward love story, The awkward reunion between Jane Foster and Thor sees them disagreeing over how long they've been split up. Jane guesses 3 or 4 years, but Thor has a much more precise count. 8 years, 7 months, 6 days, give or take. There's a reason for this disagreement. Jane was among the people snapped out of existence in Avengers Infinity War, meaning she lost 5 years before she was restored. It's also important in confirming Brandon T. Snyder's novel, The Cosmic Quest Volume 2 Aftermath, shouldn't be considered MCU canon, because according to that book, Jane survived the snap. There were a good amount of flashbacks in Thor Love and Thunder that really tells a lot of the story. One flashback establishes that Thor has S.H.I.E.L.D. boss Nick Flippin' Fury on speed dial during his time on Earth. Also, side note, Thor has Nick Fury's name spelled wrong. He has it spelled as Furry. Furries, man, they're scary. Love and Thunder features a major subplot involving Asgardian children kidnapped by Gore the God Butcher. The director actually put the real-life children of some of the stars of the movie in the movie. We got a list of them just for you, my friends. Chris Hemsworth's own son, Tristan, as young Thor, with his twin Sasha playing one of the Asgardians kidnapped by Gore. Natalie Portman's children are also among the kidnapped Asgardians. The director's children also appear in those scenes as well. Even Christian Bale's children join the cast. Werewolves are slowly becoming part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and Thor Love and Thunder subtly features the first of them, a child who reveals he's a Lycan, as werewolves are lycanthropes. There's also a mid-Asian, presumably a nod to a race with the power to turn things into gold. Oddly enough, there's never been a race known as the mid-Asian in the comics, but they do exist in Doctor Who. In a rather small detail that's easy to miss, we see Odin's ravens are name-dropped. These are nods to Odin's ravens, Munin and Hugin, who've been seen in the previous Thor films. In the comics, the ravens allow Odin to observe events across the universe. Comic book tie-ins are really far out, and honestly, there should be more of them, considering this is a movie about a comic book character. Thor wants to create a God Squad, a dream team of gods to take on the villainous Gore the God Butcher. And while he imagines this team, he name-drops some interesting key names from the comics. Let's go through a few, shall we? Zeus, played by Russell Crowe, after whom he styled himself, but also proves to be a great disappointment. Never meet your heroes, kids. Zeus' son, Hercules, who makes his official MCU debut in Thor Love and Thunder's post-credit scene. Quetzalcoatl, good lord, that's a name, the feathered serpent and the sky god in the Aztec pantheon, who has teamed with Thor in the comics to battle cosmic enemies. Let's move on to something a little bit more chill. Speaking of the gods, Thor heads to Omnipotent City. That's a mouthful. Where all the greatest of gods gather in a so-called Council of the Godheads. The Council of the Godheads has appeared many times in the comics, seen in Thor God of Thunder #3, the same issue that featured Falagar's death. Thor hopes the Council of the Godheads will convene his God Squad, an approach they have taken on several occasions in the comics. Few of the gods in Omnipotent City, good God, how many more times can I say that, get speaking roles. Although the credits reference Artemis and Minerva, members of the Greek/Roman pantheon in mythology and in the MCU. One god with dialogue is Dionysus. He's helping his father Zeus organize the next orgy. You're probably asking yourself, why they're organizing an orgy. It's a long story, we don't have time. In one of the best scenes in the movie, Zeus flicks off Thor's clothes and several female gods faint upon the sight, and all we're left with is thick boy Thor himself standing there naked. And all I can say is Captain America better step down from his thick throne. Odinson's back is decorated with tattoos in honor of Loki. It's nice to see a tribute of Loki, who died in Avengers Infinity War, but whose MCU role is far from over, given there are some variants in the multiverse. Continuing on the Omnipotent City train, Thor, Valkyrie, and Jane all escape the city by blasting out on the Bifrost. As they do so, they pass 2 Celestials, who seem to be standing guard around the city. It's very possible Thor Love and Thunder is treating Celestials as simply another type of space god, thus subtly reconning Eternals, which suggests they were indeed the source of all life. If you thought we weren't going to go any deeper in Marvel lore, you'd be wrong. Go get your shovels, kids. The final battle between Thor and Gore the God Butcher takes place at the very center of the universe, in a shrine dedicated to eternity. The shrine features statues dedicated to some of Marvel's most powerful cosmic beings, including the Watcher from Marvel's What If, and the Living Tribunal. The Living Tribunal actually appeared in Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness in a blink and you'll miss it moment, in which Stephen Strange and America Chavez blasted past him as they ricocheted around the universe. But this isn't 25 Things You Missed in Multiverse of Madness. This is 25 Things You Missed in Thor Love and Thunder, baby. Who is Marvel's ultimate cosmic avatar, you ask? Well, Gore's goal is to use the Bifrost to reach eternity, the embodiment of all that is. The design of eternity in Thor Love and Thunder is adapted heavily from the comics, although in truth it's a little less spectacular. The MCU's eternity was previously teased in Guardians of the Galaxy, where he was featured on a mural dedicated to the Infinity Stones alongside other cosmic avatars, notably Death and Infinity. Alright, back to an easy one here. Thor Love and Thunder reveals the effects of Jane's chemotherapy are being reversed every time she uses the power of Mjolnir. It rightly senses she is needed, coming to her side even when she's in the hospital. This scene pays homage to Mighty Thor number 704 by Jason Aaron, in which events play out in roughly the same way. In the comics, Jane sensed Asgard was being destroyed by the Man-God, a being who hates the gods, which is very similar to Gore. And finally, let's dive a little bit deeper into the final post-credit scene. The scene reveals Jane Foster has been found worthy to enter Valhalla, the Norse afterlife. This idea is lifted straight from the Mighty Thor number 706, in which Jane died and found herself at the gates of Valhalla. In the comics, she was saved from death by Odin's magic, but there's nobody to save Jane in the MCU. For all that's the case though, this probably isn't the end of the road for Jane Foster. Moon Knight has already confirmed it's possible to come back from afterlife dimensions in the MCU. Thor Love and Thunder surely hasn't written Jane Foster out for good. Book, broom, cauldron, and cat, lock up your children because the Sanderson sisters are back. Hocus Pocus 2 bewitches us once more to these three lovable evildoers, being resurrected once more by an all-new set of meddling teens. But don't be fooled by the shiny new coat. These witches will win your heart all over again when they take stage. So hop up on your brooms, sweepers, and Roombas, because we're going over 20 fun details you missed in Hocus Pocus 2. Like that of the black flame candle, once this candle is lit, it cannot be undone. So keep your eye out for spoilers and fun. I'm Joey C. Let's go! This movie is doing more than celebrating the almost 3 decades old cult classic. If you didn't know already, Disney is celebrating its 100th anniversary next year. And to celebrate that fact, movies will open with the use of the Disney 100 intro, making this the last film to be released without it. The design that transitions into the opening scene has been in use since 2006, so not a bad run so far. A nice short one to wet our whistle. We would be doing disservice to these wonderfully wicked three without going over that early scene with them nothing more than mere teenagers. Taylor Henderson, Nina Kitchen, and Juju Brenner play young Winifred, Mary, and Sarah respectively. In both meanings of the word as well, each of these young actors took the characteristics of their older counterparts wonderfully. Winifred is conceited and direct, Mary has a crooked mouth and outbursts like a small dog, and Sarah has her signature floaty hands and walk. But we're not here to simply sing praise. Did you notice how the first person to be called by the Mother Witch's song was Sarah, and she would later adopt the song as her own later on? Or that Mother Witch changes the origin story of the book. In the first film, we are led to believe that the three sisters got the book from Satan himself. A minor change, but an interesting one. But there is more to this scene than meets the eye. For instance, if you are familiar with the Salem witch trials, you may know of the Witch House of Salem. The house belonged to one of the judges during the horrific event. You can still visit it today, and I have. It's very spooky. While the movie doesn't use this historic site, it does borrow it. In the flashback scene, the house of the Reverend looks awfully similar to that of the infamous Jonathan Corwin. It works for this small part. Having the Reverend, who prosecuted the Sandersons, live in the Witch House of Salem is just too priceless not to mention on this list. Fast forward about 330 years, and that brings you to our protagonists of this movie. The new duo, sometimes trio, of teens are Izzy, Becca, and Cassie, friends forever attending Skelton High School in Salem, a high school whose name dates all the way back to the founding of Salem. Samuel Skelton was the first Puritan pastor in America, who, if you weren't aware, was responsible for the persecution of men and women during the Salem witch trials in the late 17th century. But do not fret, dear viewers. Disney knows better than to name a fake high school after a murderous monster. Samuel died before the trials officially begun, and his family actually tried to fight against the hysteria. If you watched the last video we did on the first movie, we pointed out how the cast wouldn't be in school because Halloween landed on a Saturday. Well, we have another case in this one. The movie takes place in modern day. Doing some sleuthing around, I found out that it would have to take place in either 2020 or 2022. The problem is, in 2020, Halloween did have a full moon, but it was on a Saturday. In 2022, however, Halloween was on a Monday, but no full moon. A weird fact, you do with that information what you will. Mirroring characters can be a great way to show contrast or synchronicity. Take the classic Mercutio and Romeo. Mercutio is polar to Romeo's hopeless infatuations. What does this have to do with Hocus Pocus? Well, Becca, Izzy, and Cassie are mirrors and foils to the Sanderson sisters. The first clue is their color palettes, obviously taking inspiration from the original Coven of Three. The second is how they act with one another. Becca is headstrong and definitely the leader, but unlike Winifred, she values her partner deeply. Izzy is loyal and acts like the social lubricant of the three. However, she is not as whimpering as Mary when confronting the acting leader of the trio. That leaves us with Cassie. She is not in the movie nearly as much as the other five in this comparison, but her boyfriend acts as a version of Sarah's boy infatuation, just not to a distracting extent. Literature analysis can reveal wonders in cheesy, fun family films. And as a 5th grade teacher would say at 11:30 in the morning, geography time, baby! Did you know that the last movie was filmed in Salem? It goes without saying, if you have a location, why not use it? Well, the sequel diverges from this path just a tad. See, it was actually filmed in Rhode Island instead. Crazy when you realize that the opening scene for both movies were set in the 1600s. Because in Salem, there is Salem's Pioneer Village that the first film used for the flashback. It's an interesting choice to go with in Hocus Pocus 2. Maybe Rhode Island just has a more Salem look on camera than Salem itself. I don't know, man. Moving right along, we get to arguably the coolest magic shop in all of fiction, Salem's Old Magic Shop, where its owner and seemingly only employee, Gilbert, portrayed by Sam Richardson, spins a tale of witches and curses in the town of Salem. The movie makes it very clear that this shop is in reality the old Sanderson shack. But Sarah's lucky rat tail isn't the only thing that's missing here. Beyond the giant black cauldron, there are 2 cages hanging from the ceiling filled with mean bullies from the 90s that have seemingly disappeared from the witch's abode. It wouldn't be beyond reason to assume that somewhere in the cabin, there are 2 cages with 2 skeletons waiting to be saved. With a rating of PG, you can't get away with too much anymore. Long gone are the days of Jaws and Airplane, which both only got a PG rating. Sure, PG-13 wasn't created yet, but you'd hope they'd at least be R. Now that things are much more prudish, Hocus Pocus 2 has a problem. How can you show 3 devil-worshipping witches emerging from hell in order to cannibalize the youth to stay alive forever? Well, you can have them rise from the ground with red mist. I guess that works. Preceding a musical number, of course. Not that there could have been a better way to reintroduce these monsters. The imagery is a clear nod to the more adult nature that these witches operate on. Imagine what this movie could do with a PG-13 or even an R rating. Mary could eat the actual face off of a child instead of a raspberry mask. Now the moment you've all been waiting for, the musical number. Leading vocals, we have Winifred, giving a kick-ass performance of Witch is Back, and her sisters as backup vocals. This scene catapults the movie into a loving, fun energy it holds throughout the runtime. If you didn't know any better, you would assume that this song was a Sanderson original, but we're gonna make sure you do. This is an admittedly delightful PG rendition of Sir Elton John's Bitch is Back. Fantastic song, by the way. Watching it just put a giant smile on my face. Plus, we get a fully uninterrupted version to accompany the credit roll. If you haven't already, go listen to the original, and then re-listen to this song. It has an energy and sound that bites more than Winifred. Lovingly, of course. If there is one thing that Hocus Pocus 2 is about, beyond the unhinged rage the mayor has after not getting his apple, it's progress. Fan favorites, and even the new original ones from the sequel. Everyone learns or progresses beyond what they were. Billy has a new active role in the plot. The new trio fix their frayed friendship. And even Mike learns to be more sensitive to others' feelings. This theme is comedically used for the witch's chosen mode of transportation. The original movie has Mary and Sarah saddle a vacuum and mop respectively. For the modern update, the pair traded their 20th century garbage for new 21st century cleaning tech. Introducing the flying Roomba and what appears to be a Swiffer wet jet, one could only imagine the speeds you could get on a motorized flying machine. Like every good accidental villain, Gilbert's story started as a misunderstanding. As a young kid, he was bullied on Halloween 1993 and saw the flying sisters in the sky. As a young, impressionable kid who loved magic, you can understand how he would see them as the embodiment of his wishes come true. This leads his obsession into eventually bringing the witches back to life. But we're not here to discuss the overarching life of Gilbert. His story started with his candy being stolen and beaten down to the point he'd idolized the sinister sisters themselves. But we know of two very specific bullies who were very active on Halloween 1993. We also know that after the sisters died, Gilbert goes and finds the book. At the end of the original, we are left with the book waking up. I give to you this: Gilbert found the Sanderson house, found book, and found the two bullies caged up, and connected the two ideas into the Sanderson sisters taking revenge on people who hurt him. If Jay and Ice hadn't bullied Gilbert, then he may have missed the sisters altogether. While missing from the plot of the sequel, they are arguably the reason for it all. You didn't think we'd forget Billy, did you? This wouldn't be a Hocus Pocus video without Billy Butcherson, played by the ever-so-talented Doug Jones. This zombified jaw-dropping head-turner has had a lot changed since the first movie, and a few things kept exactly the same. For starters, the Prince of Petrified Flesh was no adulterer. As he explained, Winifred was obsessed with the one kiss they shared as teenagers, and that his true romance was with Sarah. Secondly, we now get to hear him speak at great lengths, and it was worth the wait because his banter with Gilbert was fantastic. And finally, have you noticed how messy his hair is in this movie? That may be because it is the exact same wig he used in the first film. A nice choice because he just rolled out of a grave, you know? So it's gotta look messy. Plus, sadly, even if there was somehow another Hocus Pocus production, he would still be missing. His well-earned rest comes at the price of a good zombie life. Paying homage to those who came before is a nice way to earn brownie points for fans and critics alike. One way the movie pays this tax is with the inclusion of costumes in the town festival. The first movie used as many costumes as they could because of budgeting restraints. The new one uses them to let Penny and Gary Marshall appear once more. For context, Penny and her brother Gary played the Medusa Lady and Satan in the original movie. And as the mayor awaits for his forsaken apple, the couple he asked to hold his place in line is dressed like these giants of silver screen. I will now use my powers of foresight to give an Easter egg that will be true in the coming years. Cornbread, who is the drag queen performing Mary Sanderson in the competition, will be on RuPaul's Drag Race in the future. Well, maybe. See, while on set, the producers were so impressed with Cornbread that they offered to call RuPaul on the performer's behalf. The offer was turned down, but the possibility is still very high that this movie will send Cornbread onto the runway anyways. After the Sandersons lose their lookalike contest, a story they can share with Dolly Parton, the Sandersons start another flash mob. Fun, and we'll be back to this scene in a few. But as they fly away, Winifred stops to spy on a couple watching the original movie through a window. Nobody brings this up in the movie, but I'm here to rationalize it. There was a scrapped remake of Hocus Pocus that was planned to be released on a freeform. Why was it scrapped? Well, Hocus Pocus 2 started production. Could this couple be watching the scrapped movie just on the in-universe freeform? It could explain why everyone dressed as the sisters appear in the movie, despite there being no way the public could have a photo of them from the 1600s. So it stands to reason that the town has all these rumors and stories about Halloween 93, which became so popular that a movie was based off it, meaning characters we know and love became characters in the very movie we're watching. Or it's just a cute little nod. Who knows? In the Walgreens, fun product placement, Becky and Izzy use salt to deflect Winifred's spell, even though it's not a full circle. Beyond the point. Later, they use it to trap them, and go on failing to protect the mayor. Salt circles are to the superstitious what force fields are to kids on the playground. But have you noticed in all these situations that salt was involved, a white witch is around? It's debatable whether Allison was a white witch, but Becca absolutely is. Maybe we have this whole witch thing wrong. All it takes is salt and a strong bond to get those magic juices flowing. Repeating on loop in our heads was the line, "It's a small bus." Why was this their first reaction? The scene mirrors the one from the first one where they're tricked into thinking headlights are the sun. The Sandersons even mention how they won't be fooled by that again. But when they see the mayor's car, it registers as a small bus. Well, looking back over the first one in the modern day reveals why. The Sandersons know what they experience, which is why they are confused by a sliding door, but not a road anymore. They have all ridden, and Sarah even drove a bus, but not a car. So this funny little bit is just a well-planned gag. Before we were blessed with this cursed movie, it went through a few changes, namely the ending. See, during the test screenings of the movie, audiences felt that the ending was the weakest part of the film, to the extent that it was rewritten and reshot. With the ending we got, it doesn't feel like it could have been much different. How drastic were the changes between what there was and what we got? Maybe once the DVD is released, which I don't even think it will because it's on Disney+, we can watch it on a special feature. Or will it live in our imagination like a certain dancing zombie? The movie was released at witching hour, 3 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. So if you fell asleep before the credits ended, or just skipped it entirely, I don't blame you. But if you had, then you would miss another sequel bait. Before the screen cuts to black, we have a nice close-up to a box labeled Second Black Candle, implying the door is open for yet another sequel. And even if there isn't, this is a nice bookend to a story that started all the way back in 1693. And finally, when I say Hocus Pocus 2 just refurbished and revamped Hocus Pocus' story, it's not a bad thing. Here's why. The movie starts with a flashback to the 1600s, where we get context to who the Sandersons are and why they do what they do. The second movie just gives us more heart and deeper understanding. It flashes forward to our main cast in school on Halloween. We are given a wacky dressed adult who tells the tale of the Sanderson sisters, and indirectly responsible for the lighting of the black flame candle. In the new movie, we have Gilbert, who is actually just responsible. The witches return, and in looking for their book, come face to face with modern day. The witches have a run-in with the cast and then start a dance mob. They even happen around the same time in each movie. The adults are useless, and our heroes trap the witches and assume the day is won. Even Billy repeats his role, but in reverse. The climaxes are different for various reasons, but even Mary and Sarah's goodbye are the same. Hocus Pocus 2 rhymes with Hocus Pocus in a complimentary way. And before we go, in the last Hocus Pocus video, we mentioned a secret cameo was promised in this one, so here it is, a last bonus fact. Allison's necklace has a profile shot on it, also known as a cameo, baby.
We all know that Knives Out slaps, but can its sequel measure up? Today we're gonna comb through every scene like we're Benoit Blanc and show you what you might have missed in Glass Onion, a Knives Out mystery.
Something is afoot.
Miles' obsession with the Mona Lisa is one of the cornerstones of Glass Onion. It's a perfect manifestation of his vanity and is a centerpiece of the gut-busting finale. When he introduces the painting to the cast, he goes on about how Leonardo da Vinci pioneered a unique brushstroke technique that prevented lines from appearing on the painting, resulting in a work that looks different from every angle, stating, "It's never what you thought you were looking at." This is a clear metaphor for the mystery genre as a whole, but it's also representative of how Rian Johnson makes his movies. Be it Knives Out or The Last Jedi, his films practically switch genres halfway through. Oh, I just mentioned The Last Jedi. Quick, time for something educational.
Don't forget.
Alright, yeah, you definitely saw Benoit Blanc playing Among Us in the bathtub with his friends over Skype. And you either laughed because it's Among Us, cringed because it's Among Us, teared up a little bit because that scene gave you some very uncomfortable flashbacks to times best forgotten, or sobbed because it was a reminder that we've recently lost two legends that were playing against him, Stephen Sondheim and Angela Lansbury. What a lovely, bittersweet pair of cameos that was. But did you see that Blanc's Amogus was the white one, just like his last name? Personally, I prefer turquoise, but if my last name was a color, I'd probably have a different point of view. Blanc's skill at Among Us rings true with how he feels about the game of Clue. He's awful at it and kind of hates it. My dear detective, that's what we call a skill issue. Despite the name of the movie, Glass Onion isn't even the first Beatles song you hear, although we'll get to it later, trust me. When we arrive at the island, Miles plays Blackbird on the very guitar Paul McCartney wrote it on, and he just drops it in the sand. You know, considering how much he values the Mona Lisa. You'd think he'd hold the other cultural artifacts in his possession in a similar regard. Then again, he is an idiot. What's ironic, and makes Miles even more of an idiot, is that Blackbird was actually written by Paul McCartney as a means of speaking to the racial strife that engulfed America in the 1960s. He's described the song as speaking specifically to a black woman, which is hilarious considered he screwed over and murdered Andy Brand. It's astounding that he can possess such an acute understanding of Da Vinci's brushstroke technique employed in the Mona Lisa, but not understand the meaning of Blackbird.
It makes no damn sense.
Then again, he is an idiot. You might think the tattoos Dave was sporting in Glass Onion was the work of the makeup department, but no, they're his own ink on full display for our pleasure. While he's got ink all over, a few that stuck out were symbols on his knuckles. The first was a symbol for Superman, which would fit naturally with Duke's macho demeanor. But did you know that he actually worked alongside Tom Welling's Superman on Smallville? According to an interview Welling did with the podcast Talkville, Bautista played a man-eating humanoid alien named Aldar in season 1. Tom Welling described Bautista as the only person in my life who's ever picked me up over his head and held me. That's so sweet. Alright, I know we're all excited to see The Rock duke it out with Cavill's Superman, but now I want to see Bautista get a round 2 with the Man of Steel. Anyone else think he'd make a good Lobo? Come on!
Oh, I see where you're going with this.
So, you thought we were done poring over Dave Bautista's body art? Well, you'd be wrong. He also had the Aquaman logo on the same hand as the Superman symbol. This isn't leading to an overlooked cameo in Aquaman, but did you know that Jason Momoa and Dave Bautista are actually great friends in real life? They met at a Comic-Con and absolutely geeked out meeting one another. Momoa's a massive WWE fan, so it makes sense that he'd be a fan of Bautista's career. They were even both lifeguards growing up. Isn't that cute? While we're all waiting to see what their buddy cop movie would look like, I can't help but wonder what the Baywatch reboot would have been like if they were the leads instead of Dwayne Johnson and Zac Efron. I guess I'll just be daydreaming by my lonesome. The Marvel references keep coming in one form or another. Remember Jeremy Renner's hot sauce and how it came back around to help fake Helen's death and allow Benoit Blanc to cry on cue? That's a reference to that one time Jeremy Renner went blind in one eye while he was on Hot Ones. Personally, I thought it was going to lead into a bit involving free guac. Not sure what was up with the Jared Leto kombucha though. It's probably a reference to him being a cult leader with the kombucha being his Kool-Aid. It's increasingly entertaining to see what Benoit Blanc has zero patience for, despite, you know, being a detective.
I'm very bad at dumb things. Ticking boxes, running around, searching all the rooms.
We've mentioned his distaste for mystery games like Clue and Among Us, but let's go back to the first movie where he grilled Ana de Armas' character about the novel Gravity's Rainbow by reclusive author Thomas Pynchon. While Armas admitted she knew of the book, she hadn't read it, to which Blanc quips back that
nobody has.
Nobody except the women's tennis goat Serena Williams, that is. In Miles's gym, you can see an LCD screen with Serena Williams reading Gravity's Rainbow. You might think at first that this is just a weird screensaver befitting an eccentric billionaire like Miles Brom, but nope. Miss Williams was just reading the novel while waiting to see if anyone present was going to work out or not. Just goes to show that the best athletes train their body and mind. The first movie had a lot of knives in it, as one might imagine given the title. Ultimately, the title's purpose came into play when Benoit Blanc described the Thromby family as a pack of vultures, knives out, and beaks bloody.
What's that supposed to mean?
But there's also Harlan's musing about how Ransom plays life like a game without consequences, until he can't see the difference between stage prop and a real knife, which ultimately came back to bite Ransom in the ass when he tried to murder Marta, only to fail because he grabbed a prop knife. This prop knife actually makes a small appearance in Glass Onion, as we can see Peg holding a pop-up knife as she boards the boat to Miles's island. Later on, when the lights go dark, we can see a knife block in the kitchen with the biggest knife missing. This was clearly a red herring meant to mislead the audience, thinking a knife would end up playing a role as the murder weapon. Hopefully when Glass Onion drops on Netflix, we can comb the movie to see where else it shows up in the movie, if at all. Cue the phrasing meme from Archer. Phrasing. Did you know that Joseph Gordon-Levitt has cameoed in every single one of Rian Johnson films? From Looper to The Last Jedi, JGL has a habit of just showing up. He was even in Knives Out, doing voice work in the murder mystery that Marta's sister was watching. But where was he in Glass Onion? Well, you know the tone that plays every hour on the hour? Yep. That's the one. Easily Joseph Gordon-Levitt's most covert cameo yet. Rian Johnson mentioned in an interview with Mashable that JGL said the word dong, and the team turned that audio clip into a musical note. I'm not even sure if Benoit Blanc could have sussed that one out. Given the title of the movie, it's natural that the end credits would play the classic White Album track of the same name. Considering how Rian Johnson deliberately placed the other tracks throughout the movie, surely the end credits would have the most poignant message of all. Well, that's a bit tricky. John Lennon wrote the lyrics to Glass Onion to deliberately confuse people who read too much into the lyrical meanings of Beatles songs. Those kinds of people annoyed him, so he decided to deliberately confuse the reader. Ironically, this lines up perfectly with the film, as any good mystery should try to deliberately mislead the viewer. Although, given the intent behind the lyrics, it's a perfect fit for the movie. Miles Braum is, as we've thoroughly established, an idiot that's constantly trying to make himself seem smarter than he actually is, which one could see as how John Lennon viewed the people who tried to overzealously interpret his work.
This is getting serious.
This does beg one final question. Is the inclusion of the song in that manner a disrespect to the artist's intent? Or am I becoming exactly what John Lennon hated? Sound off in the comments below. In one of several layers of biting social commentary, Glass Onion takes place during the 2020 COVID lockdown. And while the plot of the movie doesn't revolve around the then ongoing pandemic, Rian Johnson still manages to use the time frame to sprinkle in some subtle characterization. When the guests of the Glass Onion getaway get together in a group for the first time, we see who does and does not give a rat's about personal hygiene. Detective Blanc and Lionel clearly care about properly protecting their faces and both practice social distancing. Claire DeBella, aka Agatha, has a mask that doesn't cover her nose, a telltale sign that she's a big fat phony. I'm just joking about the fat part. Catherine Hahn, you look lovely and I would love to take you to dinner. Birdie, the vainest of the whole group, and boy does that say something, wears a fishnet mask that doesn't even block the transmission of airborne particles. I feel like that's worse than no mask at all. It's clear from her introduction that Birdie doesn't exactly possess any social grace. The lady compared herself to Harriet Tubman while on Oprah, and there's no way to make that look good, even if it's supposedly meant in spirit. Conversations with her social media manager Peg heavily implied that her tribute to Beyonce was blackface. I want to say that her still having a Twitter account is a small miracle, but we know more people have gotten away with worse on that platform. Remember how messed up her mask was? That might be a nod to a scandal involving Lana Del Rey in 2020, where she'd wear an equally useless but admittedly fashionable fishnet mask while meeting friends. Her fans absolutely roasted her on Instagram, and by that I mean they politely pleaded with her to reconsider her actions. Still, I guess it's better than not wearing one at all, like Dave and Whiskey. Miles has a habit of faxing Lionel crazy ideas in the hopes that he'll science the shit out of them and proceed to monetize them. One of those crazy ideas is AI in dogs equals discourse, which, to be fair, both of those things generate discourse on their own, so it's not his dumbest idea, yet. This is clearly acknowledging the dog-shaped drones that are becoming more and more popular as time goes on. At first, they were just used to help deliver Amazon packages, but now we're getting to the point where they're being used to help the cops deliver justice. Yeah, I can't imagine why Miles thought that would generate discourse. We've talked about how the Marvel actors in this series all end up playing characters that you'd have a hard time calling heroic.
Yes.
It all started with Chris Evans departing from the moral high ground of Captain America, and now we've got Drax and Bruce Banner forming their own not-so-super team with Agatha. The Marvel reference is pretty apparent when Duke shouts, "Disruptors assemble!" But it's interesting to think of how the characters of the MCU actors in Glass Onion parallel and deviate from their more family-friendly counterparts. We've mentioned how Agatha and Claire both put on a nice face, only to be revealed as wolves in sheep's clothing. Dave and Drax could both be classified as himbos, although one's a member of the manosphere while the other respects women of all shapes and sizes. Although before his untimely demise, Dave proved himself to be shockingly articulate when calling Andy the biggest loser out of all the disruptors. And yet he was the only one on the island who died, so you could argue that he was the biggest loser, or the biggest winner, since he doesn't have to live with his guilt. Both Knives Out and its sequel share a common theme of privileged jerks leeching off the hard work of a common benefactor. In the first movie, it was Harlan Thrombey's success as a novelist. In Glass Onion, the Disruptors gained their success off of Miles stealing Andy's ideas, but credit where credit is due, compared to the Thrombey family, the rest of the Disruptors actually had careers before Miles effectively bankrolled them. That knowledge, coupled with everyone smashing Miles' stuff and agreeing to speak out against him in court, definitely makes these privileged more likable than the Thrombeys, except Duke. That guy was an incel. Me no likey. Benoit Blanc makes it very clear to Helen that he's no Batman, and that he can't act outside the law when exposing the crimes of Miles Braum. This is funny considering that Daniel Craig's James Bond movies took a heavy influence from Christopher Nolan's Batman Begins, following the gritty reboot trend that took the world by storm, love it or hate it. It definitely worked out for his Bond films, and it just goes to show that when deciding on the tone of your film, you've got to keep in mind what the tone of the world is. Anyone else notice that the insignia of the glass onion looks a lot like the Greek omega symbol? It's pretty fitting on a number of levels. The AI that runs the compound, that I remind you that Miles stole from Andy, is called Alpha, and considering that's where the story of the Disruptors started and the glass onion is where it ended, it's pretty poetic. Although, given Miles' obvious infatuation with Fight Club, maybe he wants to be an alpha male, but cooler. So he invented the term omega male. It's a bit fan-fiction-y, but considering this movie took place before Sigma male entered the popular lexicon, it would definitely be in character. When we flash back to the initial meeting of the Disruptors in the Glass Onion bar, we can hear David Bowie's Starman playing in the background. At first glance, you could take this as Rian Johnson putting more of his favorite music in the movie, as many directors are to do. But if you look into the meaning behind the lyrics of Starman, you'll realize there's more to it. David Bowie once had a conversation with writer William S. Burroughs, where he mentioned that he was always trying to reach the young people with his music. He often received fan mail from his younger fans that, as he put it, were endowed with a forward-looking perspective that lent itself well to what he was trying to do in his music. Considering that the main goal of the Disruptors was to challenge the system and ultimately introduce a clean, renewable energy source to the world, it definitely fits the mood of that scene. Although, I feel like Bowie would want people to properly test their highly volatile energy sources before shipping them worldwide, so plus one theoretical point to Bowie on that one. The main room of the Glass Onion is a production design masterpiece, a tribute to opulence that oozes Miles' ego from every angle. The biggest one is the massive portrait of his shirtless self that's in the background more often than the Mona Lisa. It's a clear homage to his role in Fight Club, which is fitting since his character in that accidentally became a male role model for years to come, which is absolutely not the point of the film, kids. And considering that Miles Brahm is an obvious pastiche of Elon Musk, a grade A idiot that should not be idolized but somehow still is, you can see how it fits so well. The first Knives Out ended with a racist family losing an inheritance they didn't deserve. How do you top that? By smashing the possessions of a billionaire who stole the foundation of his own legacy and even get his closest friends in on the vandalism. And then you take it one step further and just blow up his house and ruin his reputation. Rian Johnson clearly has a thing for sticking it to the rich, as evident in the Knives Out series and The Last Jedi. Seriously, how can you hate the Canto bite scene? That part just gets better with age.
I do not know.
And before you can rage quit the video and roast me in the comments, joke's on you, the video's over. I guess you can still roast me in the comments, but hey, that's on you.
Terrifying biblical angels and a drunken man cursing God. It must be a Netflix adaptation of a beloved children's classic. I'm Chris Goodmakers, and I'm here to explore the new Guillermo del Toro adaptation of Pinnocchio. The Mexican filmmaker has a long and pretty varied career dating back to his innovative work in horror and even the superhero genre. However, after a while it is easy to see what the director likes. One of these things is eyeballs in places they really shouldn't be. The latest version of his persistent and reoccurring nightmare is the Sister Spirits, both voiced by a possible actual immortal being known as Tilda Swinton. The Spirit Sisters resemble more biblical depictions of angels and ancient deities. Putting aside Catholicism, Del Toro used a very similar design in his superhero sequel, Hellboy: The Golden Army. The winged being in that film was also death, offering Hellboy a second chance at life despite his destiny to destroy the world. A destiny we will all see come to pass when Del Toro's Hellboy 3 finally comes out, any day now. I mean, if the director's known for anything, it's the plethora of actually finished films he totally made. From split-jaw vampires to bulbous dogfish, Del Toro loves himself some monsters. However, there is one kind of monster he absolutely hates: fascists. The director's adaptation of the classic fable is only his latest to feature a look at authoritative despots and the effect they have on the world around them. Del Toro moves Pinocchio's setting up from pre-modern to mid-20th century. Being set in Italy, the film actually features notorious dictator Benito Mussolini. Well, a very short version of him. Stay with the video, viewer, because I will get into the history of this absolutely awful human being. But for now, he is one of the many fascists the director has villainized. Going back to one of his first big-budget Hollywood films, Blade 2. That film featured an ancient vampire lord whose own secret experiments gave rise to a dangerous new kind of vampire that hunted their own. Hellboy 1 and 2 also featured immortal Nazis and elf kings. and even Crimson Peak had an overbearing family. However, the biggest similarities are in Pan's Labyrinth and The Shape of Water. You will be shocked to hear that after all these years, the director has finally finished a trilogy. Again, Del Toro, you promised us Hellboy 3. Instead, we got David Harbour and whatever the hell this is.
Stop being a whiny little...
Pinnocchio, along with Pan's Labyrinth and The Shape of Water, are now what I would like to dub the Fascist Dad Trilogy. When Criterion packages the three movies together under that title, I want a nickel for every DVD box set sold. What? They have a streaming channel? And no one buys DVDs anymore? Damn it, I already signed the contract! All three films feature a father who is overly strict, unloving, and downright abusive. They are dressed overly formally in a uniform or three-piece suit. They hold a high-ranking position in the authoritarian government of their time period. They get horribly maimed and usually dispatched rather brutally by the end. There's also the strong connection between Perlman's Podesta and the evil Vidal of Pan's Labyrinth. Both are members of their respective countries' fascist government at the height of World War II. These aren't the only parallels between Del Toro's past and current works, but I'll leave those for later. For now, I'm sure you want something really juicy, like a dirty monkey. By the time we get to the one-eyed monkey who communicates through puppets, I was already reeling from an opening that included, in this order, a small child being obliterated in a pointless air raid, a man sinking deep into alcoholism and depression until he curses God and builds a small boy while blackout drunk, a horrifying biblical angel made of flying eyeballs. Oh my god, what is that? What is that? So when Spazzatura showed up, my response was something like, oh, this movie has a salacious crumb now. However, the little simian ended up being so much more sympathetic than the cackling toady / pet. Spazzatura mostly communicates in chirps and squeaks, so only the best voice actor will do. Which is why Del Toro got storied actor Cate Blanchett. Like, I did mention that the monkey does get to talk a little through his puppets, but the actress still had to make these noises. Also, additional fun fact about our villain turned hero monkey, his name, Spazzatura, means trash in Italian. No doubt another sign of his owner's cruelty. Also, please excuse my Italian pronunciation for this and the remaining portions of this video. The closest I've been to Italy is the time I marathoned the works of Lucio Fulci.
You may be boys, but you have the hearts of men.
Is there any closer relationship in filmmaking than Ron Perlman and Guillermo del Toro? The pair have worked together so often that if there was a punch card, Del Toro would only be 3 away from a free extra Ron. This is the 7th feature the pair have collaborated on. The previous films they have worked on together are... Hold on. Let me take a breath. Kronos, Blade 2, Hellboy, Hellboy 2, Pacific Rim, and Nightmare Alley. Let's look at another character in the movie a little closer. The evil carnival owner is played by Christoph Waltz with his distinctive voice.
We must find someone else to eat all our ice cream and popcorn and hot chocolate.
He tempts the wooden boy into signing a binding contract. Binding because it's so long you could physically tie someone up with it. He hounds Pinnocchio throughout the film until he is finally dashed upon the rocks. Oof, so satisfying. Let's hear that 20 more times. Well, there's a lot going on in both the design and even the name of the character. Volpe in Italian means fox. This is because he is partially based on a literal fox. Or at least a literary one. Ha! Wordplay. The fox in the original story teams up with a cat to con the living puppet out of some money. Count Volpe's hair even resembles a pair of fox ears. And his cane has the head of a fox on it. Let's talk about a little bit of an odd trend that's happened lately. Recently, and I guess by recently I mean the last decade, Disney has been live-actioning up its classic films. It's a trend that has given us barely expressive lions and a horrifyingly blue Will Smith. Well, Netflix isn't leaving money on the table either. Earlier this year saw the release of the Tom Hanks starring Pinnocchio. That film was a direct adaptation of the classic animated feature. Del Toro's Pinocchio is more of an adaptation of the original book. Oddly, this isn't the first time this has happened, with Netflix also answering Jon Favreau's Jungle Book with Andy Serkis's Mowgli. This round goes to Netflix. Nothing in Del Toro's Pinocchio is as terrifying as those pair of dead eyes. This version is closer to the book in a lot of ways, but it takes a few big liberties. It replaces the Toyland section with an army camp that's training children to fight in a losing war. However, it does retain some references to the original tale. During the air raid, the boys are handed gas masks, which give them elongated faces. This echoes the book where Pinocchio and his friend Candlewick are turned into donkeys after making asses of themselves. Puns are fun. I said I would cycle back to the history behind the Italian dictator, and here we are. This isn't the History Channel, so I'll spare you all the extended breakdown, but the Cliff Notes is that he came to power as prime minister in Italy in 1923. He then turned the nation into a totalitarian police state, and even made his headquarters this terrifying building. Don't worry though, because this story has a happy ending, in that he was executed at the end of the war and his body spent days being assaulted by the Italian populace. Hopefully that news is a bit of a pick-me-up after the devastating ending in Del Toro's Pinocchio. Now excuse me while I go cry for a while again. Del Toro's Pinocchio is made in partnership with the Jim Henson Company of Muppet fame, so it's fitting that the storied company now holds the record for the longest stop-motion animated film of all time. It's not that surprising considering that the film has been stuck in development hell for almost a decade now. At various points, Del Toro announced the project's cancellation and restart. It didn't really come together until the Mexican director found the right collaborator. While Guillermo del Toro's name is all over this latest Netflix original, he's not the only person that had a hand in its creation. Del Toro co-wrote the script and screenplay with animator Patrick McHale. Before he teamed up with Del Toro, Patrick McHale was known for the cult animated miniseries Over the Garden Wall. The 10-episode show followed two half-brothers as they navigated a dark and mysterious forest on a journey home. They encountered odd creatures and dark monsters. The new film and classic limited series feature a lot of commonalities. There are the young protagonists lost in a big and terrifying world. There is a mix of tone in the childlike songs and the deeply terrifying beasts that threaten our heroes. It's not surprising that Del Toro saw a kinship with his own work in the animated feature, as it shares styles and themes with his own work. Besides the lead wooden boy, the legally distinct cricket, and the master craftsman, there is another character adapted out of the book. Candlewick is the young son of Ron Perlman's Podesta. By the way, Podesta is a title, not a name. Mussolini abolished all elected mayors and town councils and replaced them with a mini dictator in the form of a Podesta. So Perlman's character is basically the de facto king of Geppetto's small village. He has an equally tight grip over his son, who he describes as
a model fascist youth.
Candlewick is also in the classic book. He is the disobedient youth who leads the living puppet astray and eventually ends up transformed into a donkey. The adaptation reframes his disobedience as a noble trait. After a bonding experience, his father orders him to pull a Kingsman on his new friend. He refuses and stands up to his father for the first time. Reframing his subservience as negative and his refusal as positive reinforces Del Toro's anti-authoritarian message. He says it's good to disobey your father, especially if he salutes like this. Yikes! Sebastian J. Cricket is the Obi-Wan voiced insect who takes up temporary residence in the wooden boy's heart. Ewan McGregor's smooth, velvety brogue. Okay, yeah, I'm getting off topic, but that accent is the reason why I've watched that otter video like 50,000 times.
They go down to the bottom, they get a stone, and they go down to the bottom, they get a seashell.
The cricket is constantly subject to massive physical trauma. The repeated hits are actually an allusion to his fate in the 1800s novel. In the book, he was ultimately crushed to death by Pinocchio with a hammer during a fit of rage. It's his ghost that follows the boy as a conscience. The movie even drops a hammer on him at one point. Given that he is narrating the tale from beyond the grave to a bunch of undead rabbits, He is also a ghost during this story here too, technically. Is there anyone more recreated in allegory than the big man himself? Given that this video already talks a lot about fascism, I'm gonna sidestep any further controversy and stick to talking about the history of directors having their protagonists die and then resurrect, all while striking that famous arms out pose in a not too subtle allusion to the crucifixion of Jesus Christ. See literally any Superman movie ever made. Well, Del Toro can't resist putting his seemingly endless wooden boy through the same illusionary trial. However, he adds another layer to it. A plot point in the film is Geppetto and Carlo's unfinished depiction of Christ on the cross for his local Catholic church. Between this plot point and the multi-eyed angel, this is a pretty Catholic film. Just in time for Christmas! In the bombing that dispatches Carlo, the crucifix loses its right arm. It sits unfinished for years until Geppetto and Pinnocchio finish it. This image is repeated when at the end of the movie, Pinnocchio sacrifices himself to save Geppetto, losing his right arm in the process. Now he's off to join other famous Jesus analogies like Aslan or RoboCop. For the final entry in this list, let's highlight some of the additional voice cast in the new animated feature. Voice acting is hard work, and despite how distinctive some actors' voices are, they can get lost in the shuffle. The half-decayed rabbits that spend their time in the afterlife playing cards are all voiced by Tim Blake Nelson, of Incredible Hulk fame. Hey, speaking of better movies he was in, he shares the credits once again with his Oh Brother Where Art Thou co-star, John Turturro, who plays the town doctor Dottore, which means doctor in Italian. Stranger Things star Finn Wolfhard is the young Candlewick, and Bern Gorman is the town's priest. Gorman worked with Del Toro previously on the monster vs. robot film Pacific Rim. Finally, the notorious dictator himself is played by comedian Tom Kenny. A comedian to play a fool. Perfect casting. Guillermo del Toro's Pinnocchio is both widely different and yet strangely faithful to the classic tale of a wooden boy who yearns to be real. The cast is top-notch and the animation is stunning. However, the big question I was left with was, who is this for?
After over 13 years, the sequel to Avatar, Avatar: The Way of Water, is finally out in the wild. So naturally, that means that it's time for us at Screen Rant to dig into this beast and find what details you might have missed in this landmark piece of cinema. I'm John Aljets. There are spoilers ahead. Let's go ahead and dive right into it. Let's start this video off with something that's actually related to a detail that you might have missed in the original Avatar. You see that? I'm so committed to bringing you guys all the details and Easter eggs that you might not have noticed that I'm literally cramming extra ones in anywhere I can put them. Aren't I just the best? You can feel free to answer, like at any time. Anyways, in the first movie, Sigourney Weaver's Dr. Grace Augustine could be seen wearing a traditional Na'vi necklace. This necklace actually belonged to Neytiri's sister, who passed away at some point before the beginning of the film. It would seem then that she subconsciously passed on her penchant for wearing jewelry from deceased loved ones, as Kiri can be seen wearing a necklace that formerly belonged to her human mother. It's one of many ways that the filmmakers visually tied Kiri and Grace together, something that I'm actually going to be talking a little bit more about later on in this video, so stay tuned for that. Not content continuing to use unobtainium as the main MacGuffin for the Avatar franchise, Way of Water introduced us to Emerta, an orangish looking liquid that is extracted from the brainstem of the Tolkun, the large whale-like creatures that the Metkaina Na'vi are spiritually bound to. Said to completely stop human aging, this stuff is around 80 million buckaroos for a small vial of it, which honestly seems like kind of a low price for something that completely stops someone from aging. But what do I know? Maybe inflation isn't gonna hit people nearly as hard as we all seem to think it's going to. It's gonna be bad. Now, the name of the stuff is actually a Sanskrit word that means immortality, which is about as on the nose as you would expect from the people who named an unobtainable rare mineral unobtainium. Now, this isn't the first time that a Sanskrit word has been used in the series. Avatar is actually a word that means the manifestation of divinity in a physical form, which itself ties directly to another thing that I'm going to talk about a little bit later. Also, bonus details here, when Spider learns that the humans literally only want the goo from the Tulkun's brains, and then dump the rest, he is appalled. This is a reference to a tradition within many native cultures, where every aspect of an animal hunted is used if possible, something that many European and American settlers failed to do during the 17 and 1800s, when they spread across the plains of North America. You know, only the fun stuff from us here at Screen Rant. Speaking of fun things, let's move on to something that is actually fun, because, you know, I don't want to bum you guys out too much. You know how for a long time the original Avatar was the highest grossing movie ever, only to be beaten out by this small little indie film called Avengers Endgame? Well, if you know that, then you probably have already noticed that Zoe Saldana is in both of them, in rather prominent roles. Which, I mean, yeah, that's kinda obvious. But did you know that with the release of Way of Water, there is now a second actor with a connection between Avatar and Endgame? Spider's actor, Jack Champion, was also in the history-making superhero flick. But where, I hear you asking? Well, remember when Scott Lang was walking around that run-down neighborhood, trying to piece together what happened in the 5 years that he was in the quantum realm? That kid that rides past him on a bike is none other than Champion himself. It's a small part, not even 30 seconds of screen time, but hey, it's still a solid connection between two of the highest grossing cinematic franchises of all time. Humanity has once again come to Pandora, and brought with them a whole lot more than just some good old-fashioned corporate greed this time around. At one point in the movie, the general overseeing operations on Pandora explains to Quaritch that humanity must colonize Pandora beyond the scope originally seen in the first movie, as Earth is pretty much dead at this point. Which, like, yeah, that's a major bummer for obvious reasons, but why choose Pandora? Humans can't even breathe the air. Doesn't seem like the best choice. Anyways, this is when we learn that the name of the city in which operations seem to be based out of is Bridgehead City. Now, that is certainly a cool name, but what does it even mean? Well, Bridgehead is actually a military term, which refers to a secure position occupied by an army inside enemy territory, from which to advance or attack. You might actually be familiar with a similar term, a beachhead. This refers to something similar, but actually means a position on the edge of enemy territory from which to advance. So basically, Bridgehead City is a place built in the middle of an area that humanity deems as hostile, which, I mean, yeah. They literally reference Pandora seemingly attacking them as if it was some kind of immune response from a living organism. It is certainly a hostile place. Why do they want to settle there again? Is it the orange goo and the rock that they can't get a hold of? It's probably those things. Also, you know, so that we can have a conflict in these movies. I don't think anyone who saw Avatar: The Way of Water missed that Kiri is one giant Jesus allegory. I mean, right out the gate, she is presented to us as effectively a virgin birth, so it's kinda obvious. However, there are some aspects of her religious symbolism that might have just passed you by, as I know that I certainly missed a few that I didn't catch until I started researching for this video. For starters, let's talk about the fact that Kiri, out of all of the Sully children, is the only one who doesn't ever seem to struggle with the whole breathing underwater thing. Throughout the movie, the key to holding one's breath is presented to us as being tied to one's ability to stay calm, something that Kiri is seemingly able to do better than anyone. However, she also shows the ability to straight up open her mouth underwater. This could be due to her connection to Eywa, as we are introduced to a species down in the deep that can help Na'vi breathe down there as well, presumably something that's made by the divine. So maybe Kiri just has this innate gift as well, or at least, you know, close to it. And that's not all. If you look at Kiri's epileptic episode as a baptism of sorts, its inclusion in the story at all makes a lot more sense, specifically as a baptism symbolizing intimacy and self-actualization. Right before she has her seizure, Kiri meets her mother and is reassured that she is loved, despite not receiving the answers that she was looking for. Similarly, in the Bible, Jesus' baptism was accompanied by a voice from heaven in which God declared him to be his beloved son. And if you notice from that moment onwards, Kiri seemed a lot less unsure of things, and actually wound up playing a large part in the climax of the movie, saving quite a few people. She does this by using bioluminescent fish to guide her family out of the sunken whaling vessel, literally bringing light and using it to guide the lost. And that is actually pretty much how the New Testament presented Jesus, more as a guide of sorts than a proper religious leader. He had a tendency to show people the way to save themselves. If you didn't see the symbolism before, do you see it now? As I said, it's kinda blatant. Speaking of bioluminescence, nailed the segue, this movie revealed that pretty much every living thing on Pandora gives off some amount of light at night, including the Banshees, those winged carnivores that the Omaticaya use as flying mounts, which at face value might actually seem a little odd. Why would a predator want to give off light in the dark? Wouldn't it be better for them to just be able to sneak up on their prey by giving off no light at all? Well, no, actually. If everything in the entire planet gave off light, it would actually be more suspicious to prey if they saw a spot in the sky that didn't have any lights in it. With lights, the Banshees actually blend in a lot better to their surroundings. See, isn't fictional evolutionary biology just grand? For the entirety of the first film, we only ever saw the Omaticaya clan of Na'vi, a small group of jungle-dwelling catfolk whose culture contains elements that are largely based off of those of native societies within the Americas, both north and south. So when the Way of Water took the story away from the trees and floating mountains the Omaticaya call home, out to the sea, it's understandable that the newly introduced Metcaina people would take inspiration from other cultures. Director James Cameron worked directly with Maori actors in order to integrate elements of the indigenous Polynesian people into the Metcaina. This can be seen not only in their tattoos, which are visually similar in form and placement to traditional Maori tattoos, but also with a dance that they do, which resembles a traditional haka dance, adapted to fit Na'vi biology, mostly by including tail and ear movements. It's actually worth pointing out that the connections to the Maori people don't actually stop there, and instead run a lot deeper with the Na'vi, extending even into the first film as well. As when Cameron and co were developing the way in which the Na'vi speak, they actually looked to the Maori language for a lot of inspiration. So, in a lot of ways, the island peoples are linked directly to the heart of Avatar. Despite being voiced by Sigourney Weaver, a veteran actress, Kiri is basically just a regular teenager. Awkward, lanky, unsure of herself, kinda a hot mess. I'm sure a lot of us could relate to her when we were younger. Hell, a few of us might even relate to her now. However, she didn't always appear this way apparently. According to Weaver, the original design of Kiri was a lot more put together. It was actually Weaver who petitioned to have Kiri turn into what we got on the big screen. She felt that she was originally, quote, too neat and pretty, and she wanted her to have a messier design to really try to sell the awkwardness of youth. And Kiri's youthfulness was apparently very important to Weaver, who actually went back to high school in order to learn again what it's like to be a teen. She sat in on several classes at LaGuardia High School of Music and Art and Performing Arts, simply observing the way the students spoke and behaved. Though, maybe she didn't need to do that, as James Cameron once told her that he felt that she was young at heart already. Weaver said in an interview that Cameron told her, quote, "Nobody else knows this about you, but I know that you're 14 at heart anyway. You're so mature, and yet you're always clowning around, so I have no doubt that you can do this." Aw, that's actually kinda sweet. And just for the record, Weaver totally stole the show as Kiri, so I think it worked out for the best. On Earth, it's common to see members of even the same species develop in slightly different ways due to aspects of the environment that they reside in. This theory is literally the entire basis for evolution. You know, with Darwin and the birds living on those islands and how some of them had different beaks depending on what food was available to them and where. You know what I'm talking about. You probably took high school biology. Well, I guess depending on what community you lived in, you might not actually know what I'm talking about, but just go with me here. The point is, it seems that this rings true not just on Pandora, but also within the Na'vi themselves. The blue cat people introduced in this movie are physically different from the blue cat people we saw in the last one. With the Metcaina, it's easy to notice their seafoam colored skin contrasting with the darker blue of the Ametakaya. But they also possess thicker arms with fins near the wrist, and a tail better suited for swimming, as opposed to the lankier frame of the Ametakaya, that is better suited for swinging and climbing. Now here's the thing, the Sully children, those born of Avatar parentage, all possess 5 fingers, an evolution. This could play into Kiri's destiny, as it's important to note that Awa, who presumably had something to do with Kiri's birth, could have just had any Na'vi sire her, and yet she chose an Avatar, meaning the child of that Avatar would have that mutation. This makes Kiri a sort of genetic bridge between the Na'vi and the Sky People. Could that be Kiri's entire purpose? The entire reason for her existence? Like a lot of things, I guess we'll just kind of have to wait and see. Here's a fun little detail that doesn't really matter at all in the grand scheme of things, but, you know, still cool. If you looked at James Cameron's filmography, you would be forgiven if you thought that the dude loved sequels. I mean, his first movie ever as a director, Piranha 2: The Spawning, was a sequel, and an absolutely ridiculous good time. I recommend sitting down with some friends and giving it a watch sometime. And also one of his most influential films, the movie that spawned an entire genre of space marine related action, Aliens, is a sequel, and my favorite movie of all time. However, Avatar: The Way of Water is actually the first sequel the director has worked on since 1991's Terminator 2: Judgment Day. As a director, I mean. He was technically a producer on Terminator Dark Fate, but that doesn't count for a multitude of different reasons. Say what you will about the Avatar films, and I'm sure a lot of you can say a lot of stuff, pretty much no one can argue against the fact that Pandora is an exceptionally pretty and vibrant place. And part of what makes it so spectacular is the sheer number of fantastic creatures that call the place home. Animals, plants, all of them are beautifully imagined and designed, making for a visual treat. So much so that being able to be amongst it all physically is a major draw for the attraction within Disney's Animal Kingdom at Disney World, known as Pandora: The World of Avatar. That theme park attraction features 2 rides, Flight of Passage and Na'vi River Journey. Of those 2, Flight of Passage actually introduced a small handful of creatures that made their cinematic debut in the Avatar sequel. At one point on the ride, as audience members fly through the Pandoran skies alongside banshees, they fly near the ocean, and several critters can be spotted by eagle-eyed riders. This actually makes me curious if there are any teases to future Avatar films hidden in that attraction already, or any of the stuff there in that theme park. Given how planned out the Avatar series is, it honestly wouldn't surprise me. Hey there everybody, I'm John Aljets. I made this video and I want to know what you think. Did you catch all these details in Avatar: The Way of Water? What did you think about the movie in the first place? Personally, I really enjoyed it. Be sure to let me know your thoughts though in the comments below, or go ahead and shoot me a response over on Twitter. I'd love to hear from you. Thanks for watching, and be sure to subscribe to Screen Rant for even more great videos just like this in the future.